just share my thoughts and don't like try to review them before I share them, then that can be dangerous. Thank you, Beckett. Thank
Yeah,
you.
personally, I find I like typing better than writing because there's lots of times I'm getting ready to type something. I'm like, I don't know if I want to say that. I should probably backspace.
I just have to be careful before I hit enter.
Yep.
Right?
But you can go back and edit it on Discord. So
You can.
even that and Telegram allows you to delete entire chat histories when you
I
get
just
angry with a person.
I just
You
wanted to
pretend you
let you
never
know
spoke
that
to them.
I wanted to let you know that I had said that and thought that, but in hindsight, I would not. I think I would not have actually typed that if you were in the room, right? If you were in the room, I would not have said what I had typed out and shared, right?
It's exactly the same, but I think we have completely different relationships with people that we meet online. I mean, sometimes we sort of feel we know them intimately, and sometimes we think we say things to them that we would never say to people we actually know in real life, and they also do the same to us. So it's a different kind of relationship altogether.
I see family relationships get torn apart because of texting, like and using text without using voice and without using voice and video and without meeting in person. And they would have had a pre-existing relationship that would have been pretty good, but then all of a sudden the relationship is broken over text, over with text, and I I think there are a bunch of issues about just using text to communicate with people. We have to be careful about that.
Yes, and I think over communicating can also be a problem because maybe after you said it you think, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that, I didn't need to say that, but I felt I wanted to say because I was angry. But I
Mhm.
have to say that um being a political activist actually makes you a lot more tolerant. I mean, I think my mother would just I mean, she used to really annoy the hell out of me, and I just wouldn't be able to hold back my annoyance. But now I can. It's sort of I just sort of instantly understand why she's why she's sticking in the knives, and that she enjoys it. But she doesn't get the same kind of reaction anymore.
Maybe that takes time. Like if you're a brand new political activist with a bunch of like zeal, you might not be there yet. But maybe if you've done it for a decade, then uh, you are more tolerant at that point.
Well,
It's a
yes,
difficult
because
thing to do. Sorry, Claire, go
well,
ahead.
yeah, but just saying you do kind of have to take a step backwards and in a way predict how they're gonna be offensive and what they're gonna accuse you of if you say theirs, and and then it becomes water off a duck's back. So in a way, I'm grateful to people who have been so intractable and malicious, even deliberately pretending you never that they don't understand what you're saying, which is something my mother does a lot, or just sort of forgetting entire conversations, so you have to start again to make your point. I'm sure we all know people like that.
Well, I mean, it happens to me. I'll forget things. My memory doesn't work well. I started taking lion's mane mushroom pills just to try to help my memory, but because our memory is limited, like the number of things we can keep in our short-term memory is limited, and the ability to recall the past is limited. So, I yeah, there's people better at it than me, and I'm better at it than other people, right? So I try to be a little
Yeah.
forgiving about it.
I know I've been outright offensive to some people very close to me because I had some very passionately held views that I desperately wanted them to understand. But
Yeah.
from their perspective, the way I was going about it, it's like, okay, this crazy person's just being a jerk. Please stop or go away. And that, which is fair.
I find over the years you develop techniques, and I think the best way to make a point is not really to lecture them for hours on end, but really to ask some questions that are kind of obvious, really, but they won't answer honestly or correctly because answering honestly would give their position away. And those would be the best questions to ask. And you don't have to be in the room. It's like, yeah, save it up until maybe after I'm dead, and then, you'll get what I'm saying. But you remember the question that you wouldn't answer, because questions have this ability to nag at it, and hang around in your consciousness.
What question do you want to ask, and why? I just asked the question.
I mean, the obvious one now is Christo-liberalism kaput? And why won't anybody answer honestly? Because it's a sacred cow. People can't admit it. And also, as far as I'm concerned, it's like, we know what you're going to say next. If we admit that Christo-liberalism is kaput, you're going to push your horrible idea on us, and we don't want it. And that's the end of the conversation. So, but that's okay too.
And then there's the why. The why are you asking the question too? So that's your question, but why are you asking the question?
Because I want to make the point that, if your moral system is no longer working, then you need a new one, because if we're already watching the consequences of not having a moral system, of having your ruling classes making up the law as they go along. And nobody can say, oh, hey, that's obviously wrong. Why are you doing it? Because if you haven't got a moral system, you just never know what anyone does, that falls on the right side or the wrong side of your moral principles.
I think to me, this conversation is very sacred cowy, and it's hard to parse, because, okay, what is a Western Christian anymore? And when you bring up ruling class, that is, there are many in that group that I struggle viewing as a moral Christian. That's my personal perspective. But that is a microcosm of the macrocosm. You look at the country, okay, what is a moral Christian? Well, if you're on the coast, they view things very differently than people in flyover country.
Well, I think the problem is,
I'm not going to demand you put on your video, but I will allow Chad to request, just to make sure that you hear that.
Of course, I prefer not to, but you know who I am. You're not, in doubt about me impersonating.
I recognize your voice.
Thank you. And I'm saying, really, there is a problem with Christianity, and I know I have a different take from you guys, but then the version of Christianity that I have, that through research, is not the textbook version of Christianity that you guys would have learned at school, but it and I'm saying, okay, my interpretation of Christian history is that it is burnt and bloody. It's been failing for 500 years, and you're refusing to admit it, because what I'm going to say. If you admit it's kaput.
I think that, I guess I kind of know where you're going, because when you answer the why, you're talking about sacred cows. I mean, ultimately, it comes down to the thing that I don't like, is I don't like forcing my religion on other people. That's the thing I don't like. I feel like
I'm not doing that.
I feel like you're suggesting that there should be a religion for the entire United States, for example. And then there would somehow be a vote or a constitutional amendment or something that would then declare that, secular Koranism should be the official religion of the United States, and that's what you. And then once you do that, there's a percentage of the population are now under this law that they don't agree with. And so it's imposing.
But it's no different to now. We all live under this regime whose laws we profoundly do not agree with.
Right.
This is, what you fear is already here.
So I disagree with federalism. I think that Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War was a mistake, because we still have slavery. We never actually ended slavery. Right?
But it wasn't about slavery. It was a war of American unification, wasn't it? I mean, that's why Lincoln sits on his throne at the Lincoln Memorial, like Zeus or something.
It was actually a mistake. So, like,
But it
yeah,
allowed you to win the Spanish-American War and declare
but,
WASP
but
supremacy.
should I care?
Well, it's a source of American power. You're a beneficiary. Why? It's something to be acknowledged,
I guess my
isn't it?
point. My point. Go ahead, Neutrino.
Is it fair to say that, Claire, you're coming from a perspective that in many ways you're seeing the United States become more and more a godless country from your perspective, and we have a lot of guns and power for a godless country, and for a godless country to have that much is concerning. Is that fair assessment of what you're saying?
Yes, because I think your ruling classes are either evil or insane, or stupid if you're trying to be kind about it. But how did they come to be so crazy and evil and stupid, about to start World War III? It would appear.
Yeah, I mean, I have answers about that. I think I think that the whole system's corrupt, and that we as individuals need to create a parallel government. Is what I think. But
We're treading on some thin ice on some of this. We are in a public channel.
yeah, it's a dangerous topic. That's why I'm not a fan of, in general. Like, I like to engineer systems, and when you have a system and you want to change it to a better system, there's a process. Whenever, as an engineer, there's a process that you do that, and it's not a process where you just dismantle the existing system and replace it with an untested system that is, and it's broad sweeping for everybody. That's not the way you do it. That's the way that it was done in the Civil War. It's the way
A
war
parallel
does it.
system that is designed to catch things that fall out of the old system has a lot of merit to it, I think.
Yeah.
Hi, Andrew.
Go ahead, Andrew. How are you doing?
So, Claire,
Okay, go
before
ahead,
you jumped
Neutrino.
on, I mentioned making a comparison to mercy and severity and a balance between the two. And in a lot of ways, I look as Western Christianity as being too far in the mercy camp, and I am ignorant of a lot of Islam, so please correct me. But when I look at Islamic countries, they seem to be a little overboard on the severity, and that really both aspects would be better off if we could go a little bit more towards the other direction.
Sure, it's a matter of interpretation, and what I propose for Americans is like, you guys interpret it. You can interpret it in a severe way. I can't do anything. You can interpret it in a liberal way. It's not in my control, but I'm just offering this as an idea to allow Americans to have a moral system. Because if you don't have a moral system, Americans won't be protected from each other or their ruling classes. And it's the same for any country. I mean, that's why, people say, well, we're Hindus, we're communists, and when the government passes any law that is in conflict with their moral system, they can say, oh, but that's
I just want to check.
anti-communist, that's anti-American, because you'd have a view of what you are supposed to be.
I want to check that this is the Andrew I know. I don't want like someone to just all of a sudden turn on a screen and have nudity or something. So, Andrew, can you just do a voice check? Let me know that you are the Andrew I know, or turn on your screen or something. The only reason I'm saying I'm okay with Claire not turning on her screen is because I recognize her. All right, so I'm just gonna.
I recognize Andrew's
thumbnail.
I know he's used that icon before.
Okay. All right.
I'm guessing his sound is having issues for.
But he might be an impersonator sometimes.
It's possible.
It can happen. It can happen. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if he doesn't speak up shortly, I might want to set him aside.
Yeah.
But I see religion as a kind of as a moral system. You can have secular political ideologies that function as a moral system, such as communism, and they would have principles. It's like an official handbook. It's like we are the people who do X, or never do Y.
Where I disagree that we need like a unified moral system, right? I disagree
Well, if
with
you
that
don't
whole
have
premise
one,
there.
then everybody has their own idea of stuff, and this is actually, what you're suffering from now, because
I'm not
obviously
suffering,
your
actually.
legislature will have
I'm
total
not
control.
suffering, Claire. I'm not
Okay,
suffering.
but other Americans are, right?
But they're suffering. Like, should I go take away their suffering? I have suffered and I've learned from my suffering, and pain is a teacher. Should I go take away their opportunity to learn from their pain and suffering?
Well, you should.
I should. So that's our big
You
difference.
you
Though,
should
right?
let me finish my
Okay,
sentence.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Obviously we should try to um, um, what's the word? Think of what we could easily do to improve our government, particularly when so many people have been complaining about it. You don't seem concerned at all. That most
I'm
Americans are not happy with their government, and
I've
you
got a
know.
website called Hero Looking for Group, and I'm inviting people to try and help create peace on Earth. And I'm saying that we got to create a parallel government in the virtual space and a community where we do the innovation and the discovery of and do real political science. Like, I've got my own ideas, right? So, you know,
Well, what's a
and
parallel government anyway? It just means
well,
like a sort of secret group or
I
something.
wouldn't know, you would show people how to do it right, right? So you would implement
But
transparency,
there's
you
a
would
two.
implement technology. You would make it trustworthy, and you do it in a way in which it earns trust and gains trust in behaving in trustworthy ways, right? So
But I mean,
for example,
in
turning on your camera.
2024, are you going to vote Trump? I mean, do you have a view of his, indictment and
I
his
mean, for
arrest?
all I know, I could, in my mind, and this is where people will say I'm delusional. In my mind, I could be president of the United States in 2024, right? So it's not out of the question for me that could happen. So
Well,
I know
it's
that
a
sounds delusional.
theoretical possibility, but why would we consider, remote possibilities when there are more urgent questions to be decided about, whether you're going to be voting? Well, who you could be voting for next
I
year?
mean, I might vote for myself for president. I have a YouTube channel called Write in Gavin Palmer, and I'm eligible, so I might do that.
So you're not really a serious person. You're just here to waste people's time talking about stuff that will never happen.
I'm not sure that's entirely fair, Claire, but I do have a question for you. Are you familiar with Protestants in America?
Well, yes, I'm aware that America is a Protestant country.
What does Protestant mean to you, if you don't mind me asking?
Protesting against the Catholic Church.
If you want to sum it up in as few words as possible, I would say that's a pretty good explanation, but in a lot of ways, it's a catch-all. If you're into the Jesus stuff and you're not Catholic, you're not Eastern Orthodox, you're automatically Protestant.
Okay, guys.
Hi, Jacob.
Are you unaware that she's making fun of you when she says you're not a serious person who's trying to do real things?
We were having a really
I'm
good
pretty sure I
conversation
am
until
aware.
you
That's why I
came.
jumped in when she said it.
Yeah.
Claire, either turn on your
Okay,
camera
you're just
or
doing
get
your
off.
drama queen shit again, right?
Claire.
You're just doing your drama.
Okay. See, this is the problem with Claire. She's not a serious person in that.
I would disagree with that too, Jacob.
She has a modus operandi, and she is doing things in certain ways.
Well, the thing is, I'm glad that I have a chance to talk. I mean, maybe I should have put her in the background earlier. But yeah, I mean, we can always ask ourselves how serious we are, and I've been doing that for over a decade, and I think I've produced more good in the world than Claire has, right? I mean, I'm raising
That's not
children.
hard to say.
Well, I mean, it's actually, but it's a very relevant point to try and look at the fruit of what you're doing, and so that's what we should all ask ourselves, and we can all ask ourselves: can we be more serious, or should we be more serious, and how could we do that?
But Gavin, do you realize that when she asked that question, it was exactly because she realizes that she herself is a caricature?
I don't know. I think that we can all be delusion. We can all have delusions. So I don't know
You
if she
can.
has a delusion or if she's, because I know I have delusions, and I don't know if this is one or if she's being paid. I don't know.
Well, with this is the problem with the fact that we're on an internet with large numbers of people who are pseudo anonymous, or like Claire, just inscrutable.
Well, she's not pseudo anonymous, though, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's why I picked out. I mean, we know who she is. She lives in London. She is a personality. She's a personality who has been in the news for at least a decade. And
Right.
so whether she's a postmodern artist or something else, you have to have enough respect for her not to write her off as simply stupid and delusional, which is what almost everybody does.
Nah, she's not. She has some craft work to her.
She is not stupid. She is not merely delusional. And this is why I keep on bringing this up in many different forums, and why she keeps on coming back, and why she's broadcasting this on her channel, is she is being exposed, and she doesn't like it.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually interested in peace on earth. So
I am as well, but again, I mean, you realize as well as I do that there are some things worth spending more resources on because you're going to make more headway than other things. And trying to make Claire into an intelligible human being, I mean, she spends more than 24/7 on the internet. She really does. She's not just here right now. She's also on Twitter. She's on Telegram. She's on Facebook. She's on many different platforms, talking to very distinct audiences, very small audiences, in many different ways.
Right.
To underestimate Claire is
what's the risk of her? What's the risk if we put her back in the stream right now? What's the risk?
She will disrupt the conversation like she always does.
I mean,
potentially she was pointing us down a direction that if we were to participate too far would put us in danger.
I mean, I guess that I'm encouraging people to try to take on personal responsibility and, attempt to, form online communities that are being productive, where we can actually innovate and learn. That would be nice. So, which I think we're doing, like in these chatting streams, and maybe we're making mistakes whenever we allow Claire on, but maybe we're not. So, I mean, that's
But Gavin, you realize that she, out of all the people in the world, she's the person that I have identified as the person who is sabotaging those discussions, which I am trying to foster.
So what should the discussion be about right now?
This is part of the reason why I have just chatting streams, is I want to allow the audience to actually help guide. I don't know if you saw the discussion I had with Kara on her channel about artists. So there's one, when you have concert artists, right? When you actually have bands playing in front of an audience, there is an interrelationship with the audience that more than a few people have thought that I am Claire. Yes, and yes, there are certainly different people who think that I'm.
Well, I mean, there's a question. There is a question like how much influence you have and how much influence we all have. Like, could Peter Thiel be paying Jacob Bacherecki to host these live streams?
Yes, it's no, and
I said it. Oh no,
this is part of the reason. This is part of the reason. I try to be very transparent, but also part of the reason I have people like you or other people have streams as well. And I encourage a lot of the people who
But how should we engage with Claire? Like, is there a way to allow Claire in to come in and speak for a minute and then put her back in the back office, after she spoke? Is there, like, what's the proper way to handle her?
That's it's possible, and you know that I, more than anyone, have been willing to allow Claire leniency where she just gets banned in most places.
Well, Andrew, you hadn't said anything before we maybe let Claire back in. It's like, do you have anything to say?
I mean, I don't know. Whenever she's on, things just kind of go to the deep end,
Well,
And that's
it's like
intentional.
it's
It
like
seems like
she makes a wild statement, and then like everyone tries catching up,
what
and
was
then
the
middle of
wild
that,
statement?
she makes another wild statement, and it's like, yeah.
So what was the wild? The one that stood out to me is that she accused. Yeah, anytime you accuse, right? So she accused the leaders of the United States to be idiots or something, something along that line, right?
Mm.
But there's a part of me that agrees, right? Right? I mean, we're going to have an election in 2024 where we get to pick your favorite idiot. I mean,
But even that is only true in a very small area, and to use that to paint the entire country or entire government with that brush is dishonest.
Democracy is never going to select the best candidate. It's just the way we do it. We're not going to select. We've got corruption, and we've got money in politics, and we don't allow people on the ballot. Like,
okay, these are famous pictures of Claire Cobb. She's not stupid. She is not stupid. Underestimating Claire Cobb is a huge mistake. You don't end up being on newspapers with your pictures with famous politicians and with pictures of you with neo-Nazis and guns in the UK. And I have to point out, despite all of this, she still has not been disbarred, and she's not been charged with anything in the UK. They don't have free speech in the UK like we do here.
Well, there is a tactic, and maybe I have the wrong assessment of the situation, but when you're talking about German politics in that time era, there was a deep concern for the spread of communism, and it was that fear of communism that kind of led to a reactionary from the other side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
I'm not sure how what point you're trying to make, though.
Well, she seemed to me to be overemphasizing the decline of the West and the disintegration of the liberal order to inspire fear in order to bring a reactionary response.
Yes. So I definitely think this is part of what she does, is she is in fact trying to inspire a reactionary. I believe it, and you can look up the Cybernetic Culture Research Unit, which is not, I don't think coincidentally based out of the UK, and look up Nick Land, who came out of there and is still a prominent figure in the neo-reactionary right in the United States. And there are definitely accelerationists out there, postmodern accelerationists. I don't know what exactly Claire's game is, but it is a mistake to think that Claire is merely stupid.
Well, there's I think that what's important, I guess my biggest criticism of Claire is that she's using a technique that does not work, right? If her goals are to, try to increase the amount of people who want secular Koranism in the world, she's using techniques that don't work.
They're techniques that are the opposite of working.
Right.
She is deliberately creating opponents for herself.
Right. And so I'm trying to use, like, I've got my own ideas, and I'm trying to use techniques where I say, I try to understand where people are at and understand their perspectives, and then just be inviting instead of trying to impose and call people names and accuse people, right?
But she's subversive. What she manages to do is create a grotesque, which repels the people who would be proponents of those things which she claims to actually care about.
Well, that's the thing that I see, and so it's yeah, I see a lot of people act like that though in the real life, where people have goals that they claim to have, but then act in ways which are counterproductive toward their goals. So that's why I don't automatically assume that that she is intentionally being counterproductive toward that goal or intentionally deceptive. Because
Yes.
it does happen. People do that. I mean, I know people who do this all the time.
Yes.
And then I even do it myself sometimes when I'm confused.
And
right?
Gavin, you have to realize that a very sophisticated operator can use that ambiguity, and that's precisely what a lot of people have been using these the opportunity for. It may be not Claire, but there are definitely people who are in fact using these deceptive tactics in order to steer the conversation. And that's what I mean when I talk about secured distributed cognition.
Yeah, I had some presumptions with Claire, but those pictures take it farther than what I was presuming. So I think Claire has some interesting questions that really aren't necessarily bad to discuss, but the way she steers the
Has she ever tried to explain those pictures and said she was wrong about them, or and has she ever been given the opportunity to actually talk about those pictures?
Oh, she's been very much given the opportunity to speak about those pictures.
Do you want to let her try to talk about those pictures?
I will. I have a very stringent rule with Claire, which is she has to turn on her camera, and there's a reason for that, because I suspect that it's not just one human being who's actually running her persona all over all of these places on the internet.
Yeah, I guess and this brings up an important topic, which I've been thinking about. So, this is the Randos United. There's an organization. You're funding these the software for this, and so the question is, well, what are the rules, and how do we figure out the rules for these streams? So, I don't know exactly what they are yet. So that's where there's a little bit of question in my mind. What are the rules for? Well, when should people show? Do people have to use their cameras? When should?
Well, right, and this is part of the experiment we're having in this little corner, is trying to have serious discussions, creating this brave space. And so I remember when Jordan Peterson started ThinkSpot.
This is the thing we could be talking about, AGI. It's doing self-reflection, and it's able to learn from its own mistakes now.
Not really.
How much time have you been putting into? How much time have you put into it in the last 2 weeks?
Gavin, I am not going to. This is part of my project of secure distributed cognition. Is I am not going to try to go down this road.
But you're going to delegate to Yosef when I'm speaking to an expert who might even be more of an expert than Yosef, and I'm listening to many experts, and I've been doing that steady for 2 weeks now.
And the problem again is, Tim, if you don't like it, go somewhere else. Honestly, no. This is another type of bad behavior, which is sitting there and complaining. If you're just going to kvetch, go do it somewhere else.
There is a question is where should the conversation go and how do we get there? And everybody's got different ideas about where it should go and how it should get there.
And that's how conversations go.
And in this chatting stream, in the description, I was like, I'm interested in technology, right? That's actually the thing. I've always been interested in for over a decade. Like I actually have created YouTube videos 10 years ago talking to the AGI that is about to be born. Right. I've been doing this for over a decade, preparing for when this AGI is born. So like that's how serious I take this.
Chazi, part of the problem and part of creating this space is there has to be a limit to the amount of kindness that we show. There has to be, because it's not like there are not other places operating with that level of kindness everybody seems to be advocating for. There's a reason why this space exists, and frankly, I've tried to be at least a little bit deliberate in who I offend and who I expose.
Well, that's an issue.
I think that's pretty fair.
Like, yeah, I don't. Yeah, the question would be, I guess, if to point at the Marylander is, where should the conversation go? Right? Everybody's got a different idea about where the conversation should go and how you would encourage it to go that way.
But Tim doesn't. So this is the thing. Why I didn't respond to him last time he came on was because if all you have is complaints, I have to ask you. And this is why I got into possibly, and it's possibly my fault, I got into a fight with Kara, and I completely admit that I am taking this a little bit farther than a lot of people do, and I may be wrong about that. But the fact is, what we've been doing until now has not been working in other spaces. There's a reason why Just Chatting streams took off on my channel and not on other channels. And there are other channels trying it, and I've been encouraging other people to try it.
Yeah.
Hi, Andrew. How are you doing? Muted.
Finding that unmute button. Jacob, I am wondering. So every time someone says something, and you said it in your last streaming, is can you?
It's muted on your side, Andrew. We can't unmute you.
When you criticize someone, you should treat it like it's a criticism toward yourself. So when you're talking about people complaining, it's like, how often are you complaining, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, then what is it when you're not complaining?
People are constantly telling me I'm complaining.
So can we let Claire come in and have a say? Or are you going to make her put on her camera first?
I want her to put on her camera. Yes, please.
Claire, I guess you have to go take a shower and put on some clothes or something. Jacob pays for this thing, so I'm okay with delegating to Jacob. He funds it. I'm not funding any of this stuff.
And this is a rule we've generally been trying to impose, not just me. I mean, this is a rule that we've found to be very useful.
I'd say I'm worried. I'm more worried about what happened to Eric Sykes, Father Eric Sykes, as you call him.
What do you mean?
I think he had someone put on the camera, and they were like, maybe.
Oh, that happens.
Indecent exposure. So,
it's not just him. It's happened several times.
Claire's going to do that. So,
and no, I don't think she's going to do that either. See, the thing is, one thing, too many people make this mistake of just dismissing her as stupid or crazy. That's what she's not. I mean, she's broadcasting this on her channel right now. I don't know if you noticed.
I'm glad you noticed.
I did notice.
I caught her broadcasting this channel before and titling it Lost Boys or something. And
yep. She is a very savvy operator. And again, I have to point out, she is a member of the bar. She's been called to the bar in the UK. And in the United States, her actions would have already gotten her disbarred. I have no idea why she has not been disbarred in the UK. And are legal protections of being an attorney that exist in the
Why
United
would she have been
States.
disbarred?
Her behavior is unprofessional and brings this repute to the profession.
So having a picture with a swastika and guns, for example,
that would be reason to be brought up for moral determination and stuff. And yes, it is completely one-sidedly enforced. I mean, there are things you can do on the right which will get you disbarred, which the equivalent thing on the left does not get you disbarred. But again, she hasn't been charged with anything, even though the UK is constantly charging people for things like famously what's Count Dankula and that Nazi pug. Being offensive is illegal in the UK.
I think the thing that I guess my question is for Claire. It's like, how does she explain the pictures that were taken back then, and then the second one would be like, why? What is it? Why? What does it mean to be serious? How do you know when you are being serious and when you are not being serious?
Gavin, she was making fun of you when she brought that up, because she is the prototype of the unserious person who's obviously saying delusional things.
It's like having. I don't want to make fun, but it's like having my 5-year-old try to tell me how I should be driving my car. Right? I don't feel. I can tell that she's not serious, so I can also, like, that just goes past me. I don't see how that's making fun when she says I'm not serious, right?
Well, okay. Sometimes you don't have the best social skills, Gavin.
I know, but I mean, did anyone else think that like, what does it mean to make fun of someone, right? Like, were people supposed? Is it that people should be like? How are you supposed to respond when people are making fun of someone?
It's hard to really determine another person's intent. I mean, sometimes you make fun of somebody because you're friends and you just like ribbing each other a little bit. Other times you're very pointedly trying to overemphasize flaws in order for a grand narrative to take place.
So perhaps Jacob's move of coming in and putting her in the back office was a kindness to me because she was making fun of me, and that's a good way to handle whenever someone's making fun of others in the room.
Well, I mean, I don't see Jacob hopping in anytime anybody makes fun of anybody else. That's certainly not the case, I don't think. But
I just didn't feel like
if Jacob got a sense that you were not taking Claire seriously and that you were being placed in a dangerous position, I would say Jacob came in and with the best intent, if that's the way it played out.
Well, I mean, I think Jacob has good intent.
I hope Jacob has good intent.
I like that. Yeah. Well, it's questionable. Like, we should all ask ourselves, do we have good intent? Right.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. And then whenever you accuse someone of not being serious, you have to actually also ask yourself, am I being serious? And what would that look like?
Okay, but part of the problem here is precisely that we do have a lot of these very good ways of checking our own distortions that work very well in a one-to-one situation. But when you're dealing with as large of an important discussion as the internet, you then get people who realize, oh, these are the rules, and they game them.
Yep.
Yeah, I was talking to Chad the other day about how on the internet you have no idea that, for example, how good I am at all these skills, right? Like, you just don't know the level of skill I have in a vast array of domains and how quickly I could pick up a skill in a new domain. But on the internet, you can be selected for types of manipulation with words and facial expressions, right? That's what's being selected for on the internet, which can be very different from being able to, for example, if we just lost fuel today and nobody had fuel, who's going to survive? It's like, I think I have a chance of actually surviving, right? There's a lot of people who won't. You're just screwed. I'm sorry. And some of those people are very popular on the internet. You're just not going to be able to survive when it comes down to it.
Looks like Andrew can talk now.
There you go, Andrew.
Yep. I don't know. I don't see a reason why we should let Claire in. I think it's Jacob. You've talked about Maimonides saying that Hasidim Deen, right? Christianity and Islam, right? I think us Christians are way too merciful with people like this, at least on this little corner. Yeah, that's my 2 cents. And then little point of order, I don't know. I think Tim or the Marylander is a pretty chill guy. So,
Okay. I mean, the only time he's showed up around here is to complain about Jacob, and I don't mean neutrino.
Well, he might be trying to point at, there's a question of, so Jacob, you have a level of skill, social skill that I don't have. It's better than mine. Your YouTube channel will get more subscribers. There's things like that happen. And then, so there can just be a calling and the question of, well, what exactly are we doing here, and how does it relate to real life? And so I think he wants to point at that too. And underneath all that is the question was like, how are we supposed to organize on the internet in competent ways? Because we actually can't arm wrestle over it or anything like that. How are we supposed to do that? And I think that's kind of the question that is important to him. And we haven't figured it out. And so there's a calling into question. It's like, should Jacob be at the top of this, this hierarchy? Or
no?
Yeah. but you are acting in ways in which you have a lot of influence, right? And so I think people will feel put off because they would sense that, elsewhere you wouldn't be at the top of a hierarchy, but here with your social skills, and some, public relations knowledge, things like that, you can end up in influential positions, right?
Well, this is part of the reason why I very deliberately tried to have multiple fora, right? And honestly, one of the reasons that I withdrew from the Bridges of Meaning, right? I'm not trying to stop anybody else from doing their thing, right? Nate and I obviously don't get along very well, but I don't go around trying to sabotage his efforts.
What'd you do? You went on Twitter and said he was possessed by,
No. So that was the other way around. That's when he crossed into the boundary
you're trying to do something, and you perceived him as interfering with the thing you're trying to produce into the world, right? Mm-hmm. You're trying to produce good fruit, and like I could still man him and say, oh, he thinks, and you could probably, similar, Claire would disagree with what you're aiming at and the way you do it, and so you end up with people who just have totally different views about, are you aiming at the right thing, and are you aiming the right way, and are you behaving the right way? Right?
Well, look, and part of that, I mean, there's a reason why diversity and tolerance and inclusion, and when you actually mean those things, right? Those things actually help. Having a diversity, having tolerance, including people from various backgrounds and doing different things, like actual tolerance where you disagree with each other, is actually very useful and a good thing. The problem is it's been hijacked.
Yeah, I mean, you do have a good opponent. I mean, what is a good opponent? Claire is an opponent. Nate is an opponent. How do we facilitate this opponent processing properly? And maybe it includes sticking people in the background and then bringing them up, and a moderator or things like that.
I'll be honest. The first time I was introduced to you, Jacob, you were like railing against the Christians somewhere. I think it was against PVK. Which, yeah, being from a Protestant background and knowing the whole, you know, what it gets right and what it gets wrong, I could understand. And the reason why I wasn't immediately put off by this guy on the internet who I've never seen before, talking against PBK, who I think is fulfilling an important role on the internet, is that it seemed like you were starting a conversation. You were saying, here are my points, here's my criticisms, and I'll let anyone respond. And you were making a space for people to respond too. You were setting up these just chatting streams and everything. I don't see that with Claire at all. And I'll be honest, I've kind of seen it with Tim, which I think is important. I don't know. Tolerance with a purpose. That's what I say. We can't just let... What I believe in is dialogue, right? Like, if we talk about these high in the pie concepts of tolerance and whatnot, and then we let these people on, and then they keep just talking and talking and talking and talking, and the only way we're getting through the conversation is thinking about tolerance, we're not getting anywhere. Like, it's...
But you can have a time limit. We could say, all right, you've got 2 minutes, and as long as you don't break these rules, you can speak for 2 minutes. So that's intolerance. It's like there's a boundary then where you give your opponent an opportunity.
Yeah, but at that point, it's
we
not a
really need to
natural
figure this
dialogue
out, though, because it's very easy to see someone as the enemy and not give them an opportunity to speak.
Yeah, but I don't want to be so tolerant as to destroy a natural dialogue.
I mean,
that sounds like an
care about
excellent way to use discernment, Andrew.
I care about error correction, the learning and the teaching.
Yeah, but this is at the same time, this is the internet, right? Like, we're
figuring it out as we go. Nobody has figured it out yet.
But Gavin, you pretend like there's no such thing as a DDoS attack, and there is.
I don't see Claire doing DDoS.
Oh, she's definitely doing DDoS.
So DDoS, yes. Distributed denial of service attack, is usually run when you create a whole bunch of bots and a whole bunch of scripts that are attacking a server that can't handle the load, and so there's an overload issue. I'm actually running performance tests right now, DDoSing my own test servers. That's funny.
And so it's very easy to DDoS human beings.
So some people can handle the load better than others. Like, different people can handle different amounts of load. And you can develop protocols so that you can have firewalls. And that's what I'm talking about when I say give her 2 minutes. And so then you've limited.
Or make her put on her video camera so you know that at the very least, she's not simultaneously also on Facebook and on Telegram and on Signal and on Gab and on Twitter.
So why can't you have your camera on and be on all those places?
Because if you're a single human being, you can't automate the interaction the same way that I believe she automates at least some of her interactions. She's on the internet more than 24/7.
AI is going to change this. I can create a digital Gavin with a digital voice.
Well, you know, when it does, I'll worry about it. But right now, I've been hearing that possibility for the past 20 years, and guess what? It hasn't happened yet.
Within the next year, Jacob, clip it.
Well, we will see.
Yeah, clip it.
And if you're wrong, Gavin,
a guy I worked with missile defense, he actually created a clip with Joe Rogan speaking to his coworkers, and all of his employees thought he had paid Joe Rogan to speak to him. It's like, because the tech is there and it's so good. It's just, people aren't necessarily using it to do DDoS at this point. But yeah, when will the tech is there? The question is, when will the DDoS attacks happen with this tech?
Right.
Instead of bots, Claire uses rapid fire questions.
Exactly.
The Israeli contingent is here.
Welcome, Israel.
Yeah. Let me just expand on the whole Tim point, because I feel like nobody gets what I'm talking about. We were talking about Amalek, Tim brought up on one of a previous live stream, just chatting streams with Moses. He talked about how we've all jumped the gun straight into religion, and we haven't. From my point of view, we should be diagnosing the meaning crises and then going into how can whatever religion embodied practices help and whatnot. And Tim has had the experience of not being within a religious tradition, not making that jump, and then he goes on to Bridges of Meaning, and he doesn't play their little game of immediately engaging with religion, and then what happened? He got called a heretic or something and banned, right? So even if he doesn't speak our language, that experience is important.
Hello, Teo. Hello, Nakama. Hello, Kazi.
We got the whole gang here, huh?
Apparently.
I would first of all, hello everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. Specifically about the Claire conversation, because I am a believer and I appreciate what Gavin was trying to do and I think Jacob, I think we all know that Jacob created this beautiful, interesting space. So, he shells it out, he dishes it out, but he can handle it too. So everyone feel free to call him out. It's all good. He's a big boy. Having said that, sorry, Jacob. Having said that, there still are limits with what we should be playing around with, because like I'm looking at Claire's comments right now, and Claire, I hope you don't take offense to this, because my attitude is generally, if you want to come and play over here, then everyone's down to play. But if you feel like you need to sort of like they said, rapid comment response and throw copper bombs, then you're not playing anymore. So you gotta take that seriously and realize that that's not what people are interested in. And this relates, Andrew, to your question. I'm not getting into right now whether we should be talking about the meaning crisis or not. I think we've addressed that once or twice, and obviously we could do that again, like specifically about your concern. However, I would mention that I saw Tim's conversation and I heard what Tim was saying. At the end of the day, Tim could get on here and he could talk and he could express himself. If he feels that this isn't the coddling space, and that doesn't mean people don't need to be nice, and that doesn't mean people don't need to be gracious. And if people see bullying happening here live, they should call it out. Just like I saw how Jake was responding to Claire, I still wrote to him, like, Jacob, still show kindness, and I'm sure he has his own reasons why he doesn't want to. So I feel very comfortable people calling out bullies that they see. And I feel very comfortable with Nechama jumping into a live stream and telling us all that we are sounding ridiculous, and then giving us her wisdom as she has in the past. It's all good. However, you got to be good faith. So, Tim, if you want to join, you're welcome to join. But people are going to express themselves their way over here. And if you feel, and this is not a bad thing, but if you feel like I can't handle that, it's too much for me, then you could continue listening. But you can't. The space, being a brave space, is everyone is coming ideally in good faith, and everyone is trying to work together. That doesn't mean people can't call people out. That doesn't mean Jacob, for example, could say something like he just did to Gavin about some social skills. While I don't necessarily agree with that approach, I don't think Gavin was broken down by that, and I don't think he meant Jacob was calling him out. This was all happening within love.
Jacob already tested me a long time ago in chat. He knows that he can't like ruin me with criticism.
My point is that I feel people should feel confident enough to not assume that in this space it's going to be, just hugs and kisses the whole time. And this is a place for people to expose themselves and be exposed.
Nechama, say something. Nechama?
Yeah. Nice, give me a second.
Oh, okay.
I have a few things on my mind. I'm thinking about how to say them because I'd like to be responsible. I'm pretty upset, and I'm upset about being upset because there's no reason I should be upset. There's no reason that I should be bothered by anything going on, right? This is my view. Yeah, never mind. I'm not going to explain that too much. If you're not adding to my life and you're taking away from it, I don't have a business to. Let's put it that way. Jacob, I have a personal issue. You're an adult and you can conduct yourself however you please. That's let me make that perfectly clear. And it's not my job to tell you how to behave. That being said, being a person in this space, there are two things that I've found to be continuously untenable. One is name calling, and the other one is raising your voice. So both of these things are bothering me. You said something, I caught a couple minutes of the stream this morning. You're talking to Neutrino, Fuzzy, and the Neutrino. I didn't see any of the front end of it. And you said something like, people could come on and talk to me, I don't bite. Maybe name calling and raising your voice to you is not biting. I understand there are cultural differences, but this is a universal internet space. To me, that's biting, right? To me, that's enough to make me go away. Now, you don't have to conduct yourself by my values, right? But I'm letting you know that it bothers me a lot, and I don't find it to be helpful in dialogue. I really don't. And so, like, you've expressed a couple of times why you don't understand people having a problem with you criticizing them. And criticizing ideas is one thing, but if you criticize ideas and then call them an nincompoop, you've lost the game. But, you know, like, so this is what I'm having a frustration.
Okay.
Personally.
Okay. I do want to clarify one thing that I think is really important, though.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is I'm not just talking to one person at one time. I'm talking to a large number of people at different times, right?
Yeah.
And so when some people I talk to, raising my voice with Chazi, right? Chazi and I love it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
But when
And-
you use that mode of operation with other people that really aren't here to play that game, I mean, have you ever made that mistake before, Jacob?
Sure, but the thing is that this is part of the problem of trying to speak to so many people at the same time, and this is part of why I think, you know, I don't think my channel's ever going to become a large channel, right? Because part of how I have to do things, and I think we really have to do things, is speak to different people different ways, right? And some people come on and they're saying things and acting in certain ways, and there are people who I will insult very, very, I mean, especially when you look in the comments on PVK and in text, I will use very sharp insults, right? Because that's a different medium, and in order to actually participate in that discussion, and look, there's a reason why a lot of people withdraw from these discussions. This has made you upset, right? And that causes a lot of people.
It creates an environment that's not conducive for me to participate in, being myself. So, look, I'm not going to lose sleep over this tonight. If you know, like, I stick in environments that are complementary to me, and so, you know, I'm not going to hold it against you. And I understand that contextually different kinds of communication are going to be appropriate for different people and different mediums. All I'm saying is it might be worth considering that, like you pointed out, so athlete, there are a lot of people watching. And no, you don't have to like cater and simp to the entire audience. I don't do that. certainly I would be appearing very different and speaking very differently and saying very different things than I say. I'm not really thinking about what the other people who are viewing right now are thinking of me, right? It's just it, it may be worth considering that it is in some way shooting yourself in the foot. I'm not saying to change who you are as a person, but it's like there's a few things. Like, look, if you're speaking about an entire group of people, maybe don't insult them. Maybe. You can. That's a very easy rule. Talking about Protestants, talking about Jews, talking about Christians, talking about my neighbors. Maybe I don't insult an entire group of people. Maybe that's just not useful to me or anybody else. You know, if you're talking to me specifically and you want to rib a little bit, that's one thing because you know what's appropriate contextually. But like you have people time and time again telling you how it's hurting us. Look, Jacob, in the beginning of 2020, I had some information about what was coming down the pipe. And so I started talking to friends and family about it. My sister came to me. She called me one day. She says, Nechama, I love you. My older sister. If you keep, I don't know how to tell you this, but if you keep talking to me the way you are, I won't be able to talk to you anymore. Why? Because I was telling her, look, we're going to be locked down for 2-3 years. You know, you should stock up on food, consider where you want to live. And like to her, this is all crazy madness. And I was like, look, it's true. I'm just giving you a heads up on what I know. You know, like I wasn't speaking of this calmly. I was actually a little bit more on the hysterical side. And she's like, it doesn't, I was like, but it's real, it's true, you know? And she's like, it doesn't matter how real or true this is. You are shooting yourself in the foot by raising my blood pressure, giving me fight or flight. I can't do anything. Now I'm too terrified to do anything. You're telling me the world's ending. Now I feel like the world's ending. This is not useful to me. If you approached it in a more calm way, and I was like, yeah, but it's crazy. And this is just like, I understand. But the way you're approaching me, the way you're communicating, I can't receive it. I get that it makes sense to you. I get that it's true. I get that, and it was really hard for me here because I was like, oh, I'm in the right. I'm trying to help you. I'm being righteous here. And she's never said this to me before. She literally was like, I just will have to stop talking to you as much. I was like, you know, oh my gosh, you know, and then what I did was because I was like, look, I don't know how to talk about this in a way that is not terrifying. Like I just don't. Like this is what I have, and I don't know how to do that. And she said, look, you know what you could do? You could ask for help. I was like, that was really hard for me to hear. I was like, I don't want to do that. What do you mean ask? Well, you can ask, you know, like if you're not used to having a conversation in this way, we can play around with it. Like what do you I can't remember. There was such a good question she came up with, but it was more so like, what do you need to hear? Not need to, not coddling, but like, you know, look, play with me. You're overtaking this thing in a way that I can't participate in, and you're so well-meaning, so well-intentioned, but it's like it's just, you know, and like, yeah, it sucked for a little while because I had to like hold myself back, and then I had to humble myself to ask, like, okay, can we talk about this thing? How can we talk about it? But over time, it improved our conversation. I tempered a little bit. She took me a little bit more seriously. We're able to meet in the middle. It's funny. One of the first few times we talked, Jacob, I started talking about the political stuff. And after we got off the stream, I was like, why did I bring up all of this stuff? This is like, I don't talk about this stuff with strangers. Like, that's ridiculous. And this is why I didn't tell you this part of the story. That's the part of the story that I forgot. It was a conversation with my sister, how to talk about all these things, you know? And yeah, I mean, look, I'm not saying you're right or you're wrong. Like, the truth is somewhere in the middle. Like, it's more of a...
Right, okay. But I want to point something out. So I go to a family wedding, right? I don't act anything like this. And in fact, in real life, I generally don't act anything like this because this is part of the difference between what happens in the internet when you are dealing with niches of people as opposed to dealing with general humanity, right? And I have to say, when you look at the vast majority of the internet, it is operating by a lot of the rules that you're setting up, which are good general rules. Hey, how about you don't insult large numbers of people, right? How about that? How about you don't say things? How about you don't call St. Paul Ball of Tarsus, right? Do you really need to needle all the Christians with your Ball of Tarsus thing, right? And I have to answer. I'm not needling all of the Christians with Ball of Tarsus, and I would never walk into a church and do that. There's a group of people who are coming specifically to me, and they tend to be young men because they want to hear that and see that. And at least a few of them, and I'm thinking of a few in particular, not anybody is thinking about here, who need that needling in order to give them permission to say things which they don't feel permission to say.
One thing I like to bring up is that it's good to have a criticism when it's a question, right? Like Jacob criticizes the Christians a lot, but he also has interviews with Father Stephen DeYoung. And I don't know if we want to get into this conversation, but one thing I appreciate about Tim is that when I had my initial criticism of this little corner in Amalek, he asked the right questions. He took a snippet of my conversation that was actually coherent, and he was like, I'm willing to help. Let's get in contact. And a large reason why I had that pared down post on your Discord channel, Jacob, is because I talked to Tim, and Tim is, from what I know, not too familiar with Vervaeke's language. And I was able to pare it down so that even if you don't know Vervaeke's language, you're able to understand that post. So I think it's just criticism and then open to response. That's what's necessary. And if you have to structure your whatever dialogues such that it has to allow for that, I think that's too much of a restriction. It should happen naturally.
I want to let people speak. I will just point out one thing. There's a reason why we need a diversity of forums, and I've very deliberately been trying to create a diversity of forums.
I think what I've got to say kind of fits off that. But first, I just want to commend Tim for putting some skin in the game, jumping on camera, and I'll pass it off to you. But firstly, just to go back to the Claire conversation, when she first came on, I had a reaction that I'm like, oh, I don't know if I just thought my own personal feelings, like I don't know if I trust this person. But I trusted Gavin, and I was willing to let Gavin navigate the conversation as this he wishes. However, as we also, she was playing a game that it wasn't clear, but it wasn't clear what game she was playing because she was steering the conversation, like Neutrino correctly pointed out, in ways that was leading to, can we talk about this publicly? And is this? And when someone's doing that, so when Jacob came in and sort of put the Amadan up to speak, so to speak, I was like, okay, fair enough, because I also trust Jacob, and I think these are, if I hadn't spoken to both of them individually and Jacob privately, there will be different levels of trust. I don't know Claire, but I was willing to let Gavin do it. And if Jacob, he seems to know a lot more about her, says no, I'm not sure. I think, to go back to what you ended up, Jacob, different forums would be having a conversation with someone like Claire on Discord. I think is perfectly fine. But if there's a chance that she's using the fact that it's a public conversation and also not willing to put some skin in the game by putting on camera, I'm like, I don't know if that's. I think that's like a good rule of how to navigate what you were speaking about, Gavin. And also really quickly, to the point about how Jacob comes across. I think it is one of my favorite things, like that Jacob said to me that really made me like him, was when he was like, I know I'm not going to be one of the bigger channels from this corner because of how I come across, and that takes a level of self-awareness. But the medium that we're all speaking to affects how we all come across. And Jacob is clearly speaking to, like he said, a targeted audience. But like you also said, Jacob, you're speaking to many people at once. And the way you come across will rub certain people the wrong way, especially if they don't know you. And I think to have someone come in and try to help, like, guide you, I'm sure you take it as out of love. And I think it's testament to the sort of people that this little corner curates. So yeah, I'll pass it on to Tim and see what he has to say.
I kind of missed most of the early part of this, but yeah, I think that some of the things that Jacob has done really well are self-evident, right? Look, we have 9 people here on camera. We got people watching, right? Like, he has created this space, where, like, there was a desire for it, and he holds it open. He holds the door open for most people, and I think that's incredible, and it's great. I'm enjoying the privilege right now. But, like, the only reason I said that the conversation had somehow gotten worse is because I've actually worked with intelligence agencies before. And if you think that they employ tactics as obvious and as ineffective as Claire, then you are like uninitiated. And I just, like, the point of kicking Claire off would be to get the conversation back to a place that was fruitful, or that was at least comfortable. But it's like minutes and minutes were passing after she had kicked off, and she was still there. And the person that was keeping it going knows who they are. And so, like, it was a bummer to see that Gavin wasn't given the privilege to manage the stream, because I think he's a very smart guy. I think he knows what he's doing. And it's a bummer that, like, people's words are being taken out of context. People's intentions are being taken out of context just because, like, we're getting a little butthurt. It's like, if you're gonna talk shit, expect shit to be talked back to you. Live by the sword, die by the sword. And if you don't want a fucking sword swung at your head, then either pick up a shield or stop swinging your sword. That's my main thing, and that's why I stuck up for Andrew, was because not everybody's 6'4", and sometimes you need somebody in the wings to just be like, hey man, I got you, because, like, I've been listening to these streams for a little while now, and I am horrified at the things that I hear said about religions, about groups of people, about ways of thought. I mean, like it's like if you were to say these things about someone like in their presence, you should expect to be like
Tim,
killed
I have a
in
question.
certain
But
situations.
Tim, I have a question. Why are you listening if you're horrified?
Because it's fascinating. It's
Okay,
fascinating.
then
Here.
okay.
I'm gonna insist.
I have to say that's not healthy, Tim. If you're being horrified by this conversation, you shouldn't be listening.
What did Nahama just say? I'm curious.
Good.
I'm gonna pop out of here.
You're gonna pop out?
I've got a meeting.
Thanks,
I'm
Nahama.
sorry, Sally. I didn't have a chance to hear what you guys have to say. If you guys are still chatting, I'm done. I'll pop back in. Look, there's a lot of value here. That's why I'm here, right? As far as like, you know, Jacob, actually, I think you're a lot more liberal in who you talk to than I do. You know, like somebody being an agent or not agent. I don't see that. I don't think I owe anybody my time and attention. Like if I'm not having a good time, I'm out, right? Like my guardrails are, you know, I'm not even there. So you're actually far more liberal than I am in that sense. Like, you know, I don't think I need a reason to not engage with someone, frankly, in any capacity of my existence. But that's just my opinion. But I do appreciate the how much you are putting in to try to give people a platform and give people a seat at the table. You know, despite the various quirks that we have for whatever reason. So I will say that. I wish I could stay longer. Let's see. Do I have anything else to say? I don't know. Love y'all. I'll see y'all soon. Bye.
See you, Nahama.
So going back to what Tim was saying as far as the conversation getting worse. So there's a really important reason why I haven't just banned Click. And it's actually because of stuff that Gavin has been saying, which is it's very easy to ban Claire. I have plenty of reasons to ban Claire. I'm Jewish. I don't need a reason beyond this to ban Claire from my channel. And if I were to ban her from my channel, it would actually be a ban from every channel that hosts from my StreamYard, which is several. Right?
Can I just cut in real quick before we get away from what just happened, right? Like, I made a series of statements, and you made an insinuation about my lack of mental health, right?
No, that's not what I said. No, that's not what I said.
I mean, everybody heard it, dude. Like, come on.
No, Tim,
you know,
you're just
so. When you say things like that, you are asking the other person.
That's not how it works. See, this is not how it works, Tim.
I would.
This is not how it works.
Why do you know to say
something's happening? Oh, Lance, your audio's really bad. Go ahead, Sadie.
I was going to tell Lance before he left. I was watching Nahama. I popped on here because some of the things she popped on, things you were all saying. I didn't watch the beginning either, but I liked that when Tim started to speak, Nahama started to smile again, and she was looking super stressed. And no, I didn't hear you say anything about his mental health either. But
no, I didn't. And this is the thing. Tim is playing a game here, and there's a reason why I respond to him differently than I respond to other people.
I can understand how Tim read it that way.
No. See, I can understand how he read it that way, but that's not what I said.
What did you say, Jacob?
I said that if it's horrifying to him, it's not healthy for him to be here. And like Father Eric said, it's not healthy. It doesn't mean you're unhealthy. It means it's not healthy.
At the same time, like, he brings up a potent criticism that this little corner is rapidly becoming an in-group. That's the problem with this little corner. right? When we talk
okay.
about religion, the vast majority of people have no idea what we're talking about. And when we get into this symbolic frame stuff, I worry about us bullshitting, which is why I think we should be grounded in the meaning crisis, in actually addressing something instead of going off into our whole.
But I mean,
don't
is
know,
Jacob an authority on what is
hypotheses
healthy and what is not
theses
healthy?
and all this sort
right?
of stuff.
Okay,
And
this
Drew, I've got a quick
conversation's
question.
getting really. It's going off track in a lot of different ways.
We get Sandy to say something, please.
Well, I was just going to ask, because in terms of what Andrew was saying there and about being an in-group, and it relates to what you were saying about Tim, Jacob. I had mentioned going to church on Sunday. I'm in several different groups through your channel. I'm also in some of the ones through what's going on in my church. And my experience of all of these things is different than the somebody at my church who said, this is why we avoid going on. And they listed one of the places. I think, knowing enough about me, that, yeah, I've gone through some trauma and some mental health counseling and stuff. I think people find it very strange that I'm not. Like, I didn't pick up on that being framed the way Tim saw it framed, in part because of what I've been through, and in part because of what you don't say about things that you've been through. I relate to people in all of the different contexts from my own experience, but I am not hearing it the same way as other people are in some of those other contexts. And that doesn't have specifically to do with some of the words being used, but how or why we do that. And I don't know why you were talking about Claire being banned, but I was surprised I saw you in conversation with her on a stream the other week, and that it was going as well as it was.
Well, part of the reason for that was because she had her camera on. Okay, we're having a huge meta conversation. I do want to let Tim back on, and frankly, I wasn't planning on coming on, and I have lots of work I should be doing right now. I just want to make it very, very clear. There's a reason why we're having recursive meta conversations about how to have conversations and what the conversation is, because that's actually what my project here is to have that meta conversation, right? And there's a reason why Tim's waiting in the back room as opposed to letting him up, right? Because I think he is interrupting the conversation with things like, and I seriously believe he's pretending to be offended at what I said. Now, I might be wrong. I may be wrong. I am reading intent where it might not exist. But you know what? Part of the problem here is allowing people to actually use these very open rules, right? We're letting people just jump on, anybody jump on, right? And this is a forum where people want to manipulate not just the conversation that we're having, but also the audience, right? And Tim claiming that he knows better than I do what propaganda, like, I don't know if he was actually CIA or NSA or whatever. If he was, I would distrust him even more than if he's lying. And with that, I'm going to let Tim have the floor, and I'm going to leave. Bye.
You rage quitting your own
Thanks,
stream.
Jacob. So, Tim, do you want to elaborate on your background?
No, I don't. I just want to say that, like,
well, can you say from what party?
I've
party,
worked with various DoD clients in the past, and I don't have like firsthand operational knowledge of like mission control, but I am somewhat familiar with the effectiveness of these agencies, and they're highly effective at what they do. And so if some, if if the Claire's the best they got, they wouldn't be in the position that they're in.
Well, yeah, the best they got
is what I'm
you
saying.
don't
And
see,
so,
you don't know.
but
they're invisible. They are ghost.
exactly. And so, like, I really wanted to hear what Lance and Tayo had to say because they've been waiting very patiently. But yeah, I mean, when somebody accuses you of, like, there are certain accusations that are really hard to fight against. One of them is being defensive, and the other one is being inauthentic. And so all I can say is that I am authentic, and the people that know me very well know that I'm authentic, but I don't really have any evidence to support that.
That's the nature of the
It
internet.
really depends on other people to stick up for me.
Yeah, that's the hard part about these internet conversations.
Yeah, but Lance and Tayo, I wanted to hear what you had to say.
I'll let Lance go because he's been waiting for a while.
Yeah, too bad Jacob's gone. Like, he actually said something really interesting, which is the point I make is we're on the Randos United channel, right? Which is an outcrop of Paul Vanderklay's funnel into the internet, right? Paul exemplifies, and Hezi and I talked about this, and Nakama was making this great point, which is Paul exemplifies kindness and open conversation without trying to get into this culture war and have these conversations and confront in certain ways. And I think that's fine. And Jacob made the comment there. My project is, which was very telling, my project, right? Is it my project or is it our project? I think, Gavin, you were talking about some of the gatekeeping stuff or whatever, and that's the thing that I would mention here is what should be the tenor on the Randos United channel? Should it be what Jacob wants to accomplish? I certainly have his time or whatever, or is it? And I think the answer is, and here's the answer if I were Jacob, I'd come back, would be, well, let's get other voices on here, and I don't need to be on here all the time. And in those voices, we will see people that reflect more, that have the conversations more in the way that Paul Vanderklay has the conversations, which is if you came to this corner of the internet, you came through the Paul Vanderklay type of conversation. Those are the sorts of conversations you want to have. And you have disagreements and everything else, but with that spirit of good faith. There are plenty of other places to go out and have the arguments and confront and do this and challenge people and everything else in a very abrasive and personal name calling. That's what Nakama was, the mirror she was putting up to Jacob was. He does exhort to name calling. He goes personal. It's not about the idea or whatever. And those are the sorts of things that you'll never see Paul Vanderklay do. And he'll allow some widely disparate views. So that would be, and I keep pounding the drum, and Hezi and I were in the comments here, is my point would be is that with respect to the Randos United channel, which has been taken away from the whole and now down to this little bit, what is that going to be? And I would also say, just with respect to Tim, Jacob making a decision and psychoanalyzing Tim and saying, you should do this and you should do that or whatever like that. When Jacob does that, I just call bullshit on that, to be honest. Like, you didn't have any right to go tell Tim what he should be, what he shouldn't be watching or he shouldn't be watching. He doesn't know. So anyway, I'll be
Lance,
quiet.
I have a question for you because I'm scared of Paul. I'm not scared of Jacob. If you want to know more about me, you have to find it out through listening to me talk on Jacob's channel. I've been wondering about that because in essence, I did come in via Paul, but it was via Paul having a conversation with a guy named Clay Leibolt and going on Clay Leibolt's newsletter thing. And then popping back to listen again to something and eventually deciding I wanted to approach the Discords, but I was on Jacob's Discord first. That partially has to do with my background in relationship to the place both of them would hold in sort of my outer contexts. But I'm never sure what to do with that when people start saying things about Paul and Jacob, because I'm like, I mean, I've said on the one group I'm talking to, I've said it literally to Paul, I'm scared of you.
Which is really interesting. Yeah, would you be willing to go into that a little bit? I find that comment fascinating.
Only if it's useful and you have good question. But I don't want to interrupt the bigger thing that's going on here because I'm not quite sure where I fit in that.
Yeah. No, I found, if you don't want to go into that here, that's a different conversation. I found that to be fascinating, and I don't want to discount that.
No, and I'm not unwilling. I just don't want to go off track.
So
Yeah.
I'd be curious.
As with I for sure.
too.
I think. Yeah. I think the conversation we're having, the reason, to Tim's point, that Claire was still being in the conversation even after she got kicked out, is because I think Gavin's instincts is right about what we're talking about. It's about the threat detectors. Like, this little corner does need threat detectors, and I think, to your point, Lance, Paul will have conversations with anyone, but his threat detector is his calendar thing that, very few people can actually get onto. And I think that's a wise move by Paul too, because the internet is full of people that are nuts.
He also doesn't share everything he records.
Exactly. So the whichever internet community you're making, you do need threat detectors, and just letting anyone on at any point. I mean, Father Eric will attest to what that can lead to. So, but like I put in the private chat, the threat detector needs to, fluctuate somewhere between Gavin and Jacob. We can't always be. I think the name calling, I think, is a fair criticism, but I think I just take it as part of internet culture at this point, because the medium affords. The medium is such that there will always be people that deserve to be name called, and if your audience are those people, you will resort to name calling, and yeah, it just depends on which water you're swimming on the internet.
Yeah, I think theological waters on the internet are dangerous waters, mostly because you get these people who don't understand their traditions talking about them authoritatively. You know, and when I'm going to keep defending Tim here. When people like Tim come into the conversation and he is completely outside the loop, but he has when he's completely outside the loop, it's like a lightning rod, because everyone attacks him different ways, each from their own theological place, and he doesn't understand any of it, right? So it kind of just like bounces off of him like water. And the reason he stays on here is just because it's fascinating, you know. But I think there is an actual place for him if we, I don't know, recognize John Vervaeke and his work in integrating the religious and the whatever secular and all that sort of stuff. I think that whole project is why this little corner is here. There's plenty of theological groups on the internet, but this one is one that manages to bridge them and to survive and to continue. And I think actually make progress in our theological dialogue. But it's not because we're so great. It's because we have this background outside of theology.
So how am I supposed to decide whether or not I let Claire in? Am I supposed to agree with the people whose voices say she has a camera on? And when do I put people in the background? So I have these privileges. I'm not sure how to use them. I have the power.
I noticed this, like I noticed the comments that go down the side a little bit. I'm not trying to read them because then I'll be staring off into the box. I'm fully aware since the first time that I saw Claire in conversation with anybody that she's got a much sharper mind probably than I do in terms of remembering details and bits and pieces about anybody. And she immediately said, "Oh, this is who you are." And I'm thinking, that's one of the things you know about me. One of the things you know about me is not who I am. And when I listen to Andrew talking about Jacob, or other people talking about Jacob, no, things don't just bounce off him like water on a duck. They don't.
No, I'm talking about Tim.
Yeah. Oh, Tim. Oh, okay. I was going to say Jacob takes things very to heart. One of the things I trust about Jacob is there's ways that he reminds me of myself, and the reasons that I stay in the places that I get told. My sister says, "You're a bear for punishment. What are you doing? Like, why are you putting yourself through this?" And I'm like, it's a very good question. But in that place, I see other people doing the same thing. And one of the things about me is that I value people. And just because of myself, my background, my life, the little tiny pieces of things that I pick up that don't even touch on the stuff you guys are talking about, I bring those to the table. That's all I got. So, but I've noticed in life, I'm not so young as that I haven't noticed that people say, be who you are, and say the things you say because you matter to me. If that's all I've got, then that's what I'll contribute. But I would say, Gavin, if you have the power to say to any of us, whether it's Claire, whether it's Jacob, whether it's me, anybody, and that you have expectations of what's happening in a certain conversation, the very fact that you're upfront about the expectations of how the conversation will go and when somebody may be put in the background, you say that to all of us, and then you do it.
Yeah, I haven't figured any of that out. I wish someone else would figure it out for me.
Well, and that's what I was going to say, which is follow your gut. And that's why, like Chad and I keep hammering on to some extent, if you're going to have a movement, right, or some loose organization or whatever, what's your primary purpose? Like, what is the purpose of Randos United? And then the subset of that, Gavin, is like, what was your purpose for this conversation, right?
Yeah.
And then
I invited Claire into this conversation, and Jacob has a threat detector that is more sensitive than mine, and so he hopped in. And I mean, it's a good reminder, but yeah, and I don't know how much fruit can be born out of a conversation with Claire, but I think we can bear fruit out of the process by which we have conversation. So that's what I'm concerned about, because I know people who say they have goals and operate in ways that are counterproductive. And I see that. I've done that in the past, and I see other people doing it. Perhaps we all do that, right? And so, how do you deal with people who you figure out their goals? For example, Claire's stated goal is to encourage secular Koranism and a moral framework, a unified moral framework for large groups of people, maybe even the United States, stated goal. Well, how do you do that? Well, in principle, I believe in kind of a grassroots evolution of things, such that we discover the proper way of being and invite people to participate and earn trust and gain trust and grow organically. It's never top down where I'm trying to come in with guns telling people what to do. Right?
So
fundamental difference.
Yeah.
Go on, Andrew.
Who cares about what is it? Secular Koranism here.
It's just a name, but it's like our view of the ideal. You could replace that.
Firstly, I just want to say I admire the way Gavin's dealing with leadership at the moment, because this is a leader coming to people and say, so I'm not quite sure what next step to take, and very few leaders anywhere will admit confusion. So, but if I was to, I was going to say I'm okay with whatever decision Gavin makes, and then I think that's clearing that she then goes on to insult Gavin. So now my defense detector is way up.
At some point, you're just digging yourself a hole.
So yeah, that's not the spirit in which you engage with conversation in this little corner, and just like Jacob got called out for name calling.
Well, to defend her, she has been, I would say, if she is honest, she is being mistreated, right? In my opinion, I have been treated the way she's being treated. I was making errors, and I understand why people treated me that way, but I definitely felt mistreated when I was treated that way. So I can have empathy and sympathy for my steel man of Claire.
I think, like I said, Tim earned my respect by coming on, showing his face, coming on camera, and wanted to engage in the conversation. And only because Jacob is suspicious of her, I don't know anything about her, and I know very little. Yet, we are doing distributed cognition, and we are trying to make ourselves wiser. And if a significant proportion of the lower corner have their threat detector up against this person, I think it would be on TLC to say you're not welcome, but it would be very much wise to say you're not welcome because of this reason. If she's willing to come on camera and have a conversation, I think that's perfectly fine. She'll be letting. But yeah, that's my view on it.
I think that's a really good point, Teo. Just like when YouTube drops the ban hammer for unknown reason, now you're second guessing everything. You don't know. Once you do get back on, you're not sure what to say. If we're gonna disallow certain things, I think it is important, like you said, to be precise about that, so we do know expectations and boundaries.
Yeah, and I think when Paul talked about the estuary, right? It's where the mix of the fresh water and the salt water, right, come together. Also, allowing a few monsters to help people figure out how to deal with that in their life is good. However, there does come a time where you do have to remove them if it's going to affect everyone as a whole. And so that's where, like when I think this, Gavin, when this was your conversation this morning, which is, I think there is a larger sort of principle, like what's the primary purpose of what's supposed to be about Randos United? Is it to have good faith conversations in the spirit of Paul Vanderklay, where clearly there'll be debate and passionate stuff that goes on, or is it going to take on more of a culture war sort of a vibe where we want to get people and shock people and do these things? That's a different thing. And then to sub level down, like Jacob talks about this being like almost a 24/7 news channel. Well, if this is Gavin's show and you set the parameters of this is what this is going to be, and by the way, I'm going to invite Claire on, and as long as Claire's going to come on, maybe I'll expose her a little bit, let her talk about things, and so you can have a purpose of this and kind of kick people out or pull people up to have the conversations you kind of want to have. And
I wanted to show people how I was trying to show people how someone like Claire and myself can, I would say, like both operating from a state of limitation, delusion, ignorance, can attempt to hopefully understand each other. Maybe we learn things. Like that would be nice if we learn things. Like that's what I was hoping. And then just feedback on what I witnessed is, how long do you allow people to talk? That's what I don't feel like anyone's ever figured this out. When I used to listen to Bill O'Reilly, and I was thinking, man, if I went on Bill O'Reilly, I'd give him a pencil and say, when you give me this pencil, it's my turn. And when I give it to you, it's your turn. Damn it, don't interrupt me. You know what I mean? Like there is a way that we haven't figured out where we can have people who disagree and communicate with each other. And we haven't figured that out yet.
So I chimed in. I only have a little bit of time because my kids are on spring break and I'm on daddy duty. But part of this eventually will be on me as I'm trying to build out this thing. Part of it will be coming up with certain guidelines or rules of engagement. And I think that's helpful for people, is to know, okay, here's the line. I want to be on here. I just don't cross that line. And it'll probably start off very small. And then it'll go on. But even for like when somebody like Gavin decides to, jump on here, he knows where he has to fit in. And if somebody crosses this line, he can decide how to adjudicate that. But we're working towards that. But one of the difficulties is that there are cultural issues here. Where I come from, interrupting people when they talk, that's how we talk. It was very overwhelming for my wife when she came to first family gatherings, or when she would invite me to hers, because all of a sudden I'm interrupting everybody and there's no dead time, because dead time is like weird to me. I feel really awkward. but there are cultural things, and obviously we have people even right here, right now, from all different places, and so it's a bit of a dance trying to figure out. And in the initial part of that dance is allowing your toes to get stepped on a little bit, allowing people to, be a little bit of aggressive. Like, and so far, I haven't had a whole lot of negative interactions with Jacob. I mean, he's called me a heretic a couple of times, but it doesn't. I guess I don't get hit by that.
Well, you can't just use talking over each other. That's acceptable, right, Mo? Just because you haven't experienced something, we've all experienced crossing.
That's true. So, but I'm waiting. So it's one of those things where I'm waiting for that to happen, and wondering. But it's one of those things where also Jacob has been here for a long time, right? And so people have, and to a certain degree, that's part of why Jacob has tried to turn this over to me. When I've been moving a bit slow in this process, because to a certain degree he knows that he'll probably break the rules, but he needs somebody else to adjudicate that. He can't be making the rules and then breaking them and deciding when he disciplines himself in that regard. And
I say all this knowing, like I love Jacob. I'm irascible. I like to have conversations like Jacob likes to have those conversations. Yeah. So it doesn't step on my toes. But I do hear from people that are like Nakama who actually like she very clearly stated how she doesn't feel comfortable in certain situations. Mm-hmm. And then also, if we want to be opening, and I'd say this to Sandy, as Sherry mentions this from time to time, it'll be a very masculine presence on this channel sometimes that is not a welcoming place to some extent. For us to get that kind of side of the conversation in here and so on and so forth. And also, I also know that Jacob started the first just chatting. This is his genius, right? Mm-hmm. So I say that, and I'm just trying to play devil's advocate a little bit about this side and get these voices to be heard. Yeah. And I do want it to be said that when I say this, and Jacob gets this about this, and I know he's not offended in any way by me, is I love Jacob and I appreciate what he's doing. And Jacob needs to be Jacob. Like, that's just who he is, right?
Well, it's one of those things where I haven't talked to anybody that has said they don't like Jacob. Everybody seems to like Jacob, but understands that Jacob goes places they don't think he ought to go. And again, this is part of why Jacob wants there to be these ground rules so that he can do his own channel and then he can come on this and be himself until he crosses the line and somebody can come up, but he'll still always have his own channel.
I want to point out one thing. What happens when a person in the meeting feels attacked, right? So I heard that's because you're not serious. That's what Claire had said. And I did feel attacked. And I think Nakama was making that point. I think Tim made the point. So sometimes, and then Jacob says things where he definitely makes people feel attacked. Mm-hmm. And so how are you supposed to deal with the situation when you feel like you're attacked? So and is it different when you're the owner or the moderator?
Degree matters, right?
Well, I'm going to say something too, and I'm going to talk over you to say it.
Go ahead.
I got up this morning thinking about something I had been watching on Jacob's channel yesterday, the day before, where he was having this fight with Hezi. And I've been having weird sleep because I'm working hard and tired. But this morning I got up, and the only thing really on my mind was I have got to write to Jacob. I have got to tell Jacob that one of the things I love about that conversation that he had with Hezi and the things that they were saying and the follow-up afterward was I've talked, I don't know if you guys have watched me talk on Jacob's channel, but I've talked about some of the stuff that I've shared in the other group, Mo, about my ex and about my recent partner who died a couple of years ago. What I wanted to tell Jacob was, oh my goodness, this reminded me of when we were just together and we had this fight. I can still picture exactly where we were. I don't even remember what the fight was about because it wasn't really about anything important. But I remember where we were. I remember how I felt, and I remember what I said. We had been dropping stuff off at a school, and he got back in the car, and I turned and looked at him, and I went, "Oh my God, that was awesome! I didn't know that you were actually allowed to fight." One of the things we talked about early on was that we weren't allowed coming out of other relationships, neither of us realized the joy of being able to be in dialogue about just about anything, and in just about, like how you had to have it. That's one of the things I appreciate about Jacob. And one of the reasons I trust him. It reminds me of that place. And when Mo says you can talk over each other and how his wife had to get used to that, it's kind of like that place too.
Mm-hmm. And on my wife's side, I also need to learn how to shut up sometimes too. But it's one of those things where kind of what Gavin was saying about when you feel attacked, well, how attacked? And that's where we're going to have to do a little bit of figuring out, because my whole thing typically is attack me. I can defend myself, but that's not everybody, right? Not everybody is me. And so figuring out where people are, I mean, one of the things Jordan Peterson said in that famous Kathy Newman debate was, in order to think freely, in order to speak honestly, you have to risk offending people. Now,
I hated that debate because I didn't like him at all in it.
Yeah, it was funny. My wife wanted the same thing, but he's right there. And that's where he got her. He's like, what gives you the right to make me feel uncomfortable? You've been making me feel uncomfortable this whole time. Yeah. And she's like, oh, yeah, that's what I do. And that's kind of the nature of conversation, is that risk. And ideally having faith that the relationship can withstand it. But there's always those people that take it way too far, right?
I think that's a critical component, is that good faith. And as long as we can, maybe this is too idealistic, but as long as we can all stay good faith with each other,
what does that mean?
The course correction almost automatic. In a lot of ways, we're trying to decide, do we need a course correction, or how are we conversating with each other? And if somebody comes in who's not coming from that good faith, it poisons the well to a degree.
But what is
initially, and that's why I said, even if it's me that Gavin needs to bump into the back room, like, I watched somebody on the chat say, "Oh yeah, Sandy would add something," and I'm like, "Well, I might," but that's
I could just bump you right now. I'm not going to do it.
I do think like having those like guidelines of rules, because right now there are none. And so the fact that we're all having this good conversation, that's without any rules. And so for the most part, it goes okay. So then, but having guidelines will also help people feel more secure when they come on there. Because somebody in the chat, I can't remember who, was saying, when Sandy said that Paul can be scary sometimes. Well, how is Paul scary? Well, because part of it, at least for me, is that you never know where Paul stands in anything, or in very few things, because he's very milk toast in that regard. Whereas with Jacob, you know exactly where he is. And so, knowing those parameters helps you know how to engage.
And Paul yanks your chain in a unique way. Like, everybody goes, "Oh, but Paul is so kind, and Paul is this." And I was watching his conversation on some of the things he says about Jacob, and he doesn't say. And what was it? He had something up about Orthodox. Oh, yeah, in the roundtable conversation, I guess, with Reiki and stuff. And he's going, "Oh, I know some." And I'm like, "Oh, you're such a
I know a non-practicing Orthodox.
You're such a jerk. Like, seriously, you get away with that?" Yeah.
But yeah, that's the thing about Paul, is that he's very passive and moderate, but sometimes you don't know where you are, and so that can be scary for some people. So, but anyways, all I wanted to say is that this kind of lights a bit of a fire under my butt to kind of get things going and try to help establish some of those boundaries. I'm careful with those words, because we don't want to be like, it's hard, you have to do this. I'm not that way, but it lights the fire to try to get something a little bit more organized. But I got to go take care of my kids. Love you guys.
Thanks, Mo.
Thank you, Mo. I have one quick side comment, because I don't know how to comment in the comments section, only in the private chat section. So a short, quick aside. Hey, Flevis. And yeah, I know you're scared of me. And yes, I do know. But you asked, do I know who your brother is? Yeah, you said who your brother is. So, and there, I'll give you the deaf I love you. One day we'll talk. Go ahead, Gavin. That was it. Thank you for that brief advertising moment.
No,
better go heck
There's-
call us aside things.
I have no script. I pay attention to technology and how it shapes us. We're doing it right now. We're trying to figure out how to do it. So,
Ooh.
like, more so than talking about theology or aiming to, behave in the spirit of Paul. Like I'm curious about the technology. Like I would call myself tech support. Like I like that part. So I'm a bit of a nerd in that way. And
yeah, I'm learning, and I'm just checking my notes from a potential son visit this afternoon. We're going shoe shopping.
Nice.
Okay.
Was that your idea or your son's idea?
Both.
It's the way the best ideas work.
Yeah, he also still likes that. I don't care how old I am. You want to buy me some shoes? I'm all in. Okay.
Wise man.
So go ahead, Taylor.
I was just going to address Andrew's criticism, which I think is shared with Tim, even though I didn't really get to hear what Tim was trying to say, which is the insular nature of conversations on this little corner. And I think it goes to what you were just saying, Gabby, is we're working things out. We're working out a better way to have conversation than the antagonistic way that the internet seems to promote. So in a way, we're kind of trying to work against the machine, against the algorithm, and try productive conversations. And doing that on the fly, there will be some moments where we have to pause and think, okay, all right, what's the next step?
I want people to learn how to disagree, right? So Paul, I watched a little bit of his video where he was looking at, Jordan Peterson stuff, and he had pointed out how there was a disagreement when they were talking about, the gods. And Paul's comment was, it was like a criticism toward Jordan that Jordan wanted to bring peace back into the conversation too quickly. He didn't allow that disagreement to sit there long enough. And so I think we do need to learn how to have disagreement. Maybe we should try to avoid attacking people. There's a way to communicate to do that. Maybe there's a way to deal with situations when you feel attacked. And then we don't have to always just keep it peaceful. Like, and then maybe we don't lose, maybe the YouTube channel doesn't get banned either. Those are some good rules.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, in the spirit of trying to figure out what the guidelines should be, I think not attacking each other is a good one, because different people have different tolerance for it.
I told Claire I disagree with her, and her first comment was, "You're just not serious." Right? That's not the right response to when you say I disagree.
Maybe.
Well, you have to understand the other person's perspective before you can say you're not serious, right? So the first question would be, well, what do you think how do you think I view this situation? What do you think my view is? And then try to explain why you think my view is not serious and how your view is serious. And then, there has to be some type of a way to explore the different views to figure out, am I making a mistake? And both people, the question I was asking earlier, what is good faith? Well, good faith means you're going into the conversation knowing that you're not perfect and you have a lot to learn, and that this other person may actually teach you something. And if everybody goes into the conversation like that, then I consider it to be good faith.
She reminds me of a little, in a way, of somebody on the Bridges of Meaning that I was super uncomfortable with and was avoiding it because of who I'm now starting to talk to just little bits when I have a moment. But it wasn't for any of those reasons, because it didn't work within that framework. One of the other things I was going to suggest in terms of how we can handle it is like when you look at when there was a massive amount of people on here and it was other people speaking up for people in terms of how I relate to them and how they are, and that a little bit of that cross sharing, because it wasn't an argument that grew in size. It was something different. I think those kind of things help, like, because I know, like, even in like everyday conversations, I'll get misconstrued by people. And somebody at work told me, I met somebody in their family and they came back and said, "Oh, you've made an enemy." And I was like, what the heck are you talking about? Apparently it was something I said that they took as an insult over the person I work with.
Jacob shared an opinion of that with how he regards like mental health. towards Tim.
Yeah.
Tim may have felt it as an attack. And then my question is who is Jacob to know what's best for Tim? So there's certain types of statements you can make that just there's no way you can actually be confident in that statement. And people do that. Like Jacob's statement was as wrong as his statements about you should always tell your wife she does not look fat in that dress, right? You can't just make statements like that and be confident about it.
The funny thing, I took it as a generic comment that was directed at me or anybody else that he was talking to, just one of those, generic views. And that's why I didn't react to it. So
then at that point, though, you're basically telling the world and the audience that you should not be paying attention to things that you should not be fascinated in things which are scary.
No, I didn't take it that way either.
Well, how did you take it?
Well, just maybe if you get to step back, like where you have the right to bump somebody into the back room because of how it's going, I also have the right to bump myself into the back room, So if for some reason I'm in the middle of a conversation and it's a day where I just don't have what it's going to take to be in the conversation, I say so and I jump out. Like Nahama said, I have to leave now. I don't know if I'll come back, but there's that. There's a lot of that in these conversations that I hear people doing.
I guess there's, I'm reminded of Grimgriz saying, something like he's in the world of video games and he gets a glimpse at the world outside the video games. And he's like, well, somebody needs to do something about this. Right. And so there's maybe something in a man, that's called to pay attention to the thing that's happening that is concerning and maybe try to help, make the situation better. Right. And so that doesn't seem like a problem if you see something that's concerning and then you say, well, you ask yourself, well, how can I make this situation better? That actually might be the right move. And so the message that Jacob put out there might actually be completely wrong for most men in the world, right? It was not a good message. Even so, I'm going to say what you believe it was a general message for the audience of the world, maybe people 100 years from now watching this video. It's still, I'm not sure that's a good message, right? So you got to be careful when you say things confidently. And then we have to be willing to push back, which I thought that was a brave move of Tim to just point at it. I was impressed by Tim pointing it out. And we don't have a lot of people who do that. And that's the kind of, I think that's what's missing in the world is encouraging people to point out mistakes so that error correction can happen, so we can identify leaders, we can raise them up into positions of power and influence so that we can transform this thing towards something better. We have not been doing that. We have some amazing tools, but that's the kind of thing I'm interested in, but I'm tech support, right?
CW.
Oh man, the prophet, he knows.
I think
any one of the people here could be someone that's written about in history. You just don't know. You don't know. CW might be the person. Remember that time CW made that comment?
Just that one gif.
Yeah. And it'll be that CW comment that makes somebody 100 years from now watch it.
Well, it could be, it could be Claire Call rebrands and changes her technique, and she's the person that people want to go back and study how Claire Call went through her iterations of error correction toward the ideal. Who knows? That's what I keep in my mind. I try to treat people as if we all have the opportunity to do error correction and become a better version of ourselves. That's how I try to treat everyone. And that makes me naive on the threat detector side, right?
Well, it can, but I think Nahama said something the other day about, to some degree, if you are a breathing, living human being, that means you've succeeded in a large scale way.
Well, it's not you. It's like I am everything except me, right? So it's like my ancestors and the culture and there's all kinds of things that have succeeded. They go into my nature and my nurture. And this is one of the things I think me and Claire were disagreeing on is I I consider the possibility that we are NPCs in a simulation, and that is a probable truth. Like there's a degree of probability that we are NPCs in a simulation.
I mean,
Right.
you how could you tell? I like
Right.
going
How
to
can you
Laplace.
disprove it?
Are you familiar at all with Laplace's demon?
I've heard the phrase. I don't know.
No.
Laplace was a mathematician, and kind of if you had mapped out every atom in the universe and all the physical properties from a single snapshot, you would be able to determine the entire history and everything in the future, because you know everything and how everything works. Laplace's demon is, yeah, but anything inside that system can never comprehend anything like that. So just by virtue of being in that system, you are ignorant of its true workings.
And I don't necessarily agree with that, because it assumes something about space and time, right? It assumes something about space and time and computation, right?
For the uninformed among us, what
information.
does it assume?
I'm an agnostic person. I'm very agnostic.
I mean, to me, that's like a mathematical way of saying God is inconceivable to our human brains, because God is the entire universe. He is every atom. He is all the laws, everything. As something that resides in that system, we can never have that level of comprehension of the system that we are in.
And
that doesn't bother me.
Go ahead, Sandy. I apologize.
No, you say your bit. I asked for your.
So if this is a simulation, it could have been made by creators that are like ourselves, and they could have injected an AGI program into thousands of simulations like this in order to identify the best one, and the best one may have been Jesus. And then in a way, that Jesus character is greater than the creators. So now I just flip the whole Jewish story around, right? Like the creator, you don't have to assume the creators are good, you know.
Are you making the are you making sort of the AI component self-analyze itself in that scenario?
I got a short story out the other day about how in a research facility, they created thousands of simulations called Earth and the base reality called Heaven. And they tested the AGI inside of their prison laboratories to make sure that the ones that were hedonist or selfish people who accepted Satan's offer, they didn't get released into heaven. And this is actually what we need to do in the world right now, right? In order to make sure we're not going to release a bad AI into the world. And so you can reframe that, invert it, and say, well, is that what we are? Are we one of those simulations? And was Jesus the AGI that was able to walk on water and do miracles? You know, I've all of a sudden got a respect for Jesus I've never had, where I can say, well, maybe our AGI should be like Jesus, the one we create. Like Jesus represents the ideal. Tell me who's better. I don't want Muhammad to be the AGI we release into the world. You know, show me one better than Jesus that should be released into the world.
Oh, this is why this will never be a theological corner of the internet.
Because of me.
Was it ever? Oh, see this. I've always been some kind of believer in whatever. Like I was raised in church, and now I'm hanging out in the Jewish corner learning some stuff, and I like the challenge. I like the pushback it gives me, because that's how I find my feet and my grounding. Which isn't the same as being bullied either. Like I don't mean that, you know. But I like enjoying that place. And yeah, I'm kind of weird. Like Neutrino, you said something a few minutes ago, and it reminded me of
Laplace's demon.
Well, he was talking about that. Yeah, it could be actually. I was thinking of my son, but we won't go there. Except that we're going to. So
this is the internet, Sandy. You have to be careful.
It's all right. He's gonna get new shoes later. That'll make up for it.
He'll edit it out. Yeah, that's okay. No, this is my test run for am I stupid enough and brave enough to continue writing the memoir I'm writing?
Yeah, good test run.
If you're going to go down, got to go down for something, you know, worth going down for. So in terms of math,
sounded very more clearish.
oh, let's see. What did she say? I know she's saying something. I'll have to go back and watch it later. See if she's analyzing me any better than anybody else is. So with math, I've talked a lot about language and linguistics and stuff, which I haven't studied but have lived because of the autism and deafness combined, right? And then, yeah. Oh, hell, I'm not changing my insurance for anything, whatever. So I had my thyroid out a few years ago. And I went through all the process of sort of some follow-up on it and got referred back to who I'm seeing local, who looked at me and went, "You didn't really have to do that. Why did you do that?" And I said, "Do you mind weird? I mean, like, does this have to be a logical conversation?" He went, "No, I don't mind any answers." And I said, "Okay." I had it out because I know how to do basic math and I trust my son. And he was freaking out for like several months, telling me I had 3 bad white lumps in my throat and he was scared I was going to die. And I went through all the tests. And eventually I had this one giant thing on the vocal cord here. Came back benign, but it was irritating. Knew I was getting half the thyroid taken out, but I kept replaying and replaying because he kept saying it. "You got 3 bad white lumps in your throat, you're going to die." And I'm like, no. So when they asked, I said, "Sure, take the whole thing." Sure enough, I had 3 nasty little cancers sitting in the other side of it. I don't have an explanation for that. And I'm completely happy living in a world where I don't have an explanation for everything. Because why should I, out of the entire world, know how to explain anything and everything that is possible and inexplainable?
I think anybody that says they can is false.
Yeah, like,
to me,
I knew they were testing 4 lumps, and I'm like, well, one's fine. Let me see. That leaves 3. Take them.
I like to try to explore the possible explanations. So it's not like one explanation would be the right one, but perhaps there's many explanations that are plausible, right? And so that's what I like to do, because it's actually how I set goals for 10 and 20 years in the future and then accomplish my goals. And I'm pretty good at it, right? And I'm actually bring value to companies whenever, there's a problem and I can think of the explanations for that problem and maybe weigh them according to what I think they would be. And I can start investigating the one that's most likely. And I'm really good at that, right? So, don't disregard the people who can do the explanations.
But I do want to know what Neutrino was going to say, but I'm curious also, what would you have done if that was you with that kid? Both of those things. So
I don't know.
I'm hesitant to even speculate on what I would do in that situation. I mean, I don't know your son. I don't know your relationship with your son, and a lot of that would matter. But as far as I kind of look at it, if you take all that math and science and reason and logic and all that stuff, merge it all together, you have a very lovely spreadsheet that doesn't make any sense unless it has a story. And what stories we choose to make sense of that spreadsheet, I mean, who's to say that's the right story, that's the wrong story? How should you interact with that spreadsheet? I mean, that's the stuff that's beyond logic and reason. That I don't know. You can call that whatever you want. I don't want to argue about it with you, but that's something else in my book.
But I'm saying that right there is a story, though.
Gavin,
stories are powerful.
It is.
Beautiful opportunity to tell me how the background guys were typing badly into the scenario.
The program
that could be. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I try to imagine the different ways that make sense based on my experience. And so I've had experiences other people haven't had. So that gives me some information that other people don't have. But yeah, honestly, I don't know. But like I said, I think it's really important to develop the people who can develop a skill, and being able to imagine explanations for the situation they bring an extremely valuable skill to the table. It's not, and I'm not saying that's more valuable than every other human. I'm just saying that it's an important skill among all the important skills. So And then I just point out, like, when you tell yourself a story about, I'm saying, Neutrino, you're telling yourself a story, and stories are powerful, right? So, like, it's like the thing about, you go into a room and there's a key and a door to the next room, and it's like every story we tell ourselves is like a key that opens a door into another room, and we can end up inside of a castle with this whole worldview. But you could get all the way back out of that castle and just start with a new axiom, a new fundamental axiom, and start exploring those rooms in an entirely different castle. And that's what's that humans are. Humans are these collections of stories we believe are true.
Yeah.
So, but they're all delusion. That's the strange thing. They're useful, and they cause you to be who you are. And I love people, and this is what is very connected to people. But is it true?
Would you do this even if you found out that none of this was true, or that all of the things you couldn't tie yourself to were true? Would you do it anyways?
I like to think so. I certainly hope so.
Definitely.
Me too.
And I don't worry about the truth. I really don't worry about it.
Yeah. I kind of like to go back to Plato's cave in the wall. That I think there is a truth. I think to some degree, whatever story we tell ourselves, we can't tell a good enough story to encompass all truth or pure truth. So what we get is our version of the truth, and hopefully that's at least somewhat close to the real truth. But it's hard to kind of tell. We kind of have to live a life and interact with people and
there's
process things.
There's side effects. Like, when a belief system will have trade-offs. There'll be benefits and there'll be costs, right? That's what I like to look at. And so, you could then, try to argue yourself into a belief system that is least risky and produces the least amount of harm and provides the most opportunity for being helpful to people. Like, I'm not saying I've done that, but that is something I've tried to do.
Maybe you have done it and don't know. Teo, what are you trying to say?
Oh, I have no idea. That is a dangerous question. Oh, yeah, I have no idea what I'm trying to say, but I think I'm more with Neutrino, and I think the conversation that's being had now, it's trying to match the story, whichever story, and yeah, I think. Yeah, you're completely right.
I have to acknowledge that could be true. I don't know. That absolutely could be true.
Oh, man. The problem is, if Claire's the genius she thinks she is, that how is she supposed to convince us, the dumb ones, that she's right? It's a very hard problem to be in which the genius.
Oh, she's still backstage. That's hilarious.
Yeah. She is backstage.
That is hilarious. Now I'm starting to feel sorry for her.
Well, it proves one point. You can influence from the front. You can influence from backstage. And this is life.
Well, I mean, that was great. I had to put it forward because it is a real possibility that we are, what I know I'm making mistakes, right? And I think everyone is. So.
Oh, one more check of the phone. Got to see if I'm heading out yet or not.
Yeah, I need to kick off another performance test. Boom. Start.
So far, you have saved me from succumbing to cleaning this place up, which I only get to avoid for another few hours because, yeah, I have things leaving here that need a space in which to leave. Oh, shoot. This has been delightful. I should say goodbye and actually use at least 20 or 30 minutes to do something.
Well, I'm glad you jumped on, Sandy.
In the world. Thanks.
Cheers, Sandy.
Cheers. See you later.
I mean, there is a question. What should we be talking about, right? I don't know.
Just to, whilst Claire was on, just to keep the spirit of Claire alive for longer on the stream, while she was on, I took everything she said to be pretty much Andrew Tate's theology slash motivation for joining Islam. And I would challenge a presumption that Christianity, Western Christianity, is dead or is completely failed. There are still practicing Christians doing things, and the church has never been one to look like it's winning. When it looks like it's winning, it's usually not, and it's usually when the church looks dead that you should be most worried if you're against.
Are you scared of anything that is happening in the world? Like, that's the first thing, is like the premise and assumption that Claire takes is the world is bad. I don't even accept that. Like, is the world bad? Like, how bad is the world?
Well, I'll let Neutrino speak on that while I gather my thought.
I mean, that's a struggle. That's something I really struggle with. Is that, in a lot of ways, I think whether I wired my brain myself this way with my software or it came hardwired, I have a negative perspective on a lot of things. I have an overactive threat detector, so I'm looking for threat. I'm seeing threat behind every corner a lot of times, and I at times struggle to balance that with it. The world's not falling apart. There is still good people in the world. That keeping that perspective and not just going too far down one way is something I constantly struggle with.
Here you go. So I worked with Jason Delport for over 2 years. I helped build his website for this convective heat engine. It provides water. You can be used to build a city. Did you know Chad worries about the unintended consequences of this stuff? And so I just bring that up, do my pitch. And the question is like, is the world a mess, or do we have problems? And then, how do you know your solution is not going to make things worse? It's hard. It's hard to know all of that. And then you can have strategy. And I have some experience with strategy as a software engineer who's helped try to refactor complex systems, right? So I would say there are very few people in the community who's had that kind of experience. And if they have, I'd like to talk to them. I think Mark Lefevre might have some of that experience. I just have to learn how to talk to Mark because he likes to interrupt.
I'm sorry, can you say again what experience? I know you brought up the CHE.
Well, I had 6 years writing software for the situational awareness and interoperability for the Army's missile defense systems. And basically, and then, banking system for some receivable stuff at US Bank. And then the company I work with now connects with all these social media networks and can read, private messages, comments, reviews, all kinds, and it's pulling all of that into a system. Like, I'm not like the expert in the whole world, but I've got a lot of knowledge about complex systems and how you might go about trying to refactor complex systems and how size matters and how the scale systems. And so, it's dangerous just dropping in something. That's some pretty footage.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you. I'm going to stay muted because it's really noisy here and I have the bad mic.
Well, enjoy the view.
Yeah. Thank you.
So the question I have, even if you think it's bad, then how do you fix it? That's a problem in and of itself. Like, how are you so sure that your idea is going to work, and how are you so sure that you know how to actually implement that idea? Right? There's all these problems inside of problems. But go ahead, Taylor.
The way I understand, because I'm not sure if I think the world is bad because I'm not neurotic, but at the same time, I don't see. I think I take my understanding of the Christian perspective, which is the illegal God of this world is bad, and there will be a time where the real king will come, but until then, we're living in a upside down world, so to speak. So in that case, the badness of the world doesn't surprise me or doesn't overwhelm me, because faith. At the same time, I think what you're pointing to, Gavin, is the complexity is too complex for anyone mind to take on, and you can identify specific problems, but like you rightly pointed out, even in your attempt to solve that specific problem, there will be unintended consequences. That's literally what human history is towards, just unintended consequences after unintended consequences. So to presume that any one person has the solution, I'm very skeptical.
That
Apart
I
from the one that said it died and came back 3 days later, I think he's got something to say about it.
think that's really well put too. I don't see how anybody can truly confidently view the future and say, "Oh, this is what it's going to be. That means this is what I do."
So I'm trying to do it. So I created a blog, herolfg.com. It's got version control so that when people tell me I'm wrong, I could correct things and attribute the corrections to people. I'm inviting instead of imposing. I go and try to help people who seem to have goals that are helpful, like the conductive heat engine. You know, the aim there is, well, maybe everyone in the world could have access to clean water. That would be nice.
Yeah.
Maybe the device itself doesn't accomplish that goal, and maybe it does something bad in the process. I don't think so. And there are processes by which you do these things. So that's where I'm pointing at. There are people that have skills to be able to accomplish these kinds of goals, to solve these problems, and we don't put those people into positions of power and influence.
Which problems?
Any problem, or any significant problem where you want to, just take anything, education.
How about the problem of picking one significant problem? Because that's another problem. Like trying to get people to agree on what to do. That's what we're talking about. It's not an easy thing because of tellers and reasons that this corner goes on about.
So what would be interesting is if people who identified a similar problem and thought that was the most important, they could find each other and help solve that problem together. So I don't even have to make a judgment call to think whether I agree with your problem or not. And this is the way I approach Claire. It's like, okay, you want secular Koranism. That's your goal. That's your stated goal. Maybe I can help you accomplish your goal. I'm not even going to judge if that goal is good or not. And here's some things I've learned about it, right?
I think you should judge whether the goal is good or not.
Well, the thing is what I've learned is people aren't serious about their goals, right? I'm tempted to say that almost all humans on Earth are not serious about these big goals where they just go to a voting booth and think that they're going to accomplish their goal.
I can be convinced that that's true. Yeah, that's true.
And it's because it takes a lot of work, a lot of time and energy, and we'd rather enjoy ourselves and be comfortable.
It sounds easy to say, find a goal and follow it, but that's actually pretty difficult, I think.
That's their problem. That's a big chunk of the meaning crisis is which goal should I pick? Which of these, the combinatorial explosion of finding a purpose. So
you could try to grow a garden, right? You could try to grow a fruit tree.
Grow a bean.
Grow a pear, PEAR, pear.
Grow a bean is
we should be practicing trying to do these intermediate goals, and then as we get good at that, we could learn how to try harder goals which require teams of people, right?
Which I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just pointing out the impossibility of that, as you know, because you've been living and trying to get people to do things, and not an easy task.
Well, I don't worry about it too much because I need to be a husband and a father and an employee, try to be a good neighbor. And there's other things I can continue to try to do at my local level.
It's a lot to balance.
Try to keep them prioritized properly.
And I other than try to do things what's correct for you, I'm not sure what else we can do.
Well, we could figure out how to do an election system better because our election systems are not very good. There's this thing I did in high school where we pretended to be a government, and it's like there's nothing wrong with us pretending to be a government. We could even try to collect taxes and decide on how the taxes should be spent. There's nothing stopping us from doing that.
I think it's important to do, because if you don't, I'm going to go back to Plato for the forms, but we kind of have to form in our mind what is the right way to go, what is the right goal, what is the right way to be about things, and then that's going to be separate from reality. And okay, which things can I kind of bring closer to what my ideal is? But it's a messy process.
So what's cool about technology is that, there's a lot of tools that can be created to help with this person's goal that will help with all people's goals, or anyone who's trying to accomplish a goal that is difficult and requires cooperation. Right? And that's the reason that we have so many products and companies that make so much money. So that's the reason I'm interested in tech support, is because, it's a technical problem, learning how to do an election properly, where you allow the best candidate to be selected and elected into a position of power. And maybe it's not democracy, right? As we know it.
I guess you lose me to some degree when you say the best this or the best that, because that's going to be pretty dependent from your frame of view and reference, I think.
So right now we are not doing the best.
That's an easy thing to agree with.
No matter what we are doing, it will never be the best. Mm-hmm. And so therefore we should always be trying to do error correction, right?
Okay.
And we should be able to identify objectives which are measurable, such that we can make sure that we're improving. And so that's the thing about a goal, is that it will have objectives, like key measurements that you can use to then measure how well you're accomplishing your goals. But you'll never be perfect, but there should be improvement and progress, and some rate of progress. These are mathematical terms. Mm-hmm. Like, this is scientific terms, but we don't do science. We don't do political science. There's no laboratory where we get to do political science. But what I'm learning to do is to try to invite people to participate in a laboratory where we get to practice political science. Like, and we're kind of doing it. I was at these Just Chatting
we are.
We're kind of doing it. Like, what do you do when people attack you? What do you do when you feel attacked by someone? Right. So,
yeah. As far as having kind of grand goals, what you said about taking that grand goal and breaking it down into smaller sections, I think is really important, at least for me, because I feel overwhelmed when I start looking grand narrative, big things, big projects, and it's like, oh, that's never going to work. I can never do that. But breaking it down to those smaller steps and tracking progress to keep you on that right path, I think sounds really good.
Yeah. Yeah, you can break down. That's one thing you do in software engineering on large projects, is you have to break it all down into all the smaller pieces that interact together. You do that with any kind of engineering.
So what's your favorite U.S. soccer team, Teo?
U.S.
I mean, there's a ball that's black and white and they kick it around. I can call that soccer, can I?
I think you can call it soccer. I don't have a favorite soccer team, but I've got a favorite football team though. See, actually, I would say LA Galaxy, but that's because they were the only one that I knew back in the day. But then the team that Kaka played for, I think Orlando something, I don't know. Yeah, but that's pretty much my knowledge on US.
I went to one Seattle Sounders game, and not a big soccer fan, but it was really enjoyable to go there. It was a good atmosphere. Like people were cheering, and even in the US, there were enough people in the seats to have a good time with it.
Oh, it's definitely growing compared to 10 years ago. Let's say and you've actually got a good national team as well. That the world looks like, oh, you've got some good young players. But I'm as a soccer fan, I'm kind of, my team aren't doing so great this season, so I step away from my from my family. I'll wait till next season. We've got some young players brewing, but I'll wait till we're back in the Champions League. And yeah.
Sorry if I sidetracked that too much, Gavin.
No.
That popped in my head, and I saw one to throw that one to Teo.
Yeah, my temptations at this point is to call it, or to pull in Claire to have the last word, or whatever. So
yeah, I think I'm going to have to get off here before too much longer. But if you want to pull Claire in, just it seems like we're under a restricted time frame, so we can only go too far or so far down the rabbit hole.
I think your point is that she can end up saying things that rise on people's threat detectors, basically attacks or whatnot, or accusations, and then it could even lead to conversations that are, I don't know, how dangerous. What's the most dangerous conversation?
Well, my view is that I think Claire does have an agenda. I think Claire is intelligent enough that what she says is her agenda isn't going to necessarily match what her agenda is if she does not want it to be. Now that is an accusation of sorts. I don't know, but I think she's intelligent enough to play that game if she desires. And as far as what topics are off limits, I mean, that's a question everybody has to answer. There's certainly rabbit holes I am unwilling to discuss in any way, shape, or form, and definitely not here publicly on YouTube.
All right. Well, I've got a little while. How do you feel, Teo, if I let her in without her camera on? I know you say you like her to have her camera on, but she doesn't have her camera on.
Yeah, I'm willing to have a conversation with almost anyone. I think the fact that we've spent the last 3 hours talking about how dangerous talking to Claire is she might know that she's not welcome under normal circumstances. So I feel like we'll be right to bring her on to let her out at least.
All right.
I'll speak for mine. There she is.
Hello, Claire.
Welcome back.
Thank you for having me back. You baked me up into this super villain, this Marvel super villain. Thank you.
It would be I would feel pretty intoxicated if somebody was giving me all that power.
Golly.
So crazy.
You're wearing a mask in your picture here too?
Yeah, that's a way to make it a super villain. You've got a ninja costume.
Yeah, it is triggering, but I thought since I am selling a form of Islam.
Claire, I have to ask about the swastika pictures. What is that?
Well, as you know, I have been active in politics, and you go to meetings, you go to dinners, people hear about you, and then they invite you to join their party, and you join their party, and you continue saying stuff that you know is a bit edgy, but you think you should say it anyway, because what the hell is the point of not saying anything? And you get into trouble, you get expelled, and without a political party, I thought the best way of showing my commitment to the cause of nationalism, which I want to define as government in the national interest, is to get those photos taken to show that I kind of see the pain of the white urban proletariat.
There's a difference between posing with BNP or even UKIP and those pictures. So why go to that extreme? You could show your nationalism by, joining BNP.
Yeah, I have joined. I did join the BNP when they asked me to join. They were going to make me the London mayoral candidate, but I was expelled for saying stuff on the Victoria Derbyshire show on the BBC on 5 Live. You can still read the transcript and hear the exchange even now. So I mean, I never claimed to be from the party, but everybody was a little upset at me because a lot of BNP members are claiming disability benefit, and they didn't like what I said. So they expelled me, and somebody up north who was ethno-nationalist wanted to become civic nationalist and wanted to win the local election as parish as local councillor. And he thought parading me as his, well, not exactly running mate, but his political associate would help his chances. I knew he had that flag. I did make a point of having it taken because, well, it seemed a once in a lifetime opportunity to, make the point about nationalism. I mean, I just thought people would say, would ask me questions about it, like, why did you do it? Do you really hate Jews, etc.? And I thought, well, just because I've been photographed near that flag doesn't mean that I'm a Nazi. I've never said anything anti-Semitic. I don't really hate Jews, but obviously to get the attention of the white urban proletariat, I had to, in some way, visually signal to them that I get what they are trying to say about immigration, which actually doesn't just concern only white people. It concerns, all the immigrants already here wondering what the hell is going on.
That's
How do
true.
you feel? Go on, Trina.
I question how representative that is of the white proletariat in England or the U.S. But
I'm glad I have
would like to
Neutrino
ask
and
you,
Teo here. I just have to say that. I'm glad I have both of you guys here to help me with these questions to clear.
If you take all the things that you likely feel accused of right now from the past few hours, do you worry about maybe you're vulnerable to some of those groups? If you're playing with heavy hitters like that, how do you keep yourself from being captured by such ideology?
Heavy hitters? They're not heavy hitters at all. They're actually, well, I mean, I would say low education, low status, low information, and more intelligence and sinning. I mean, they use the symbolism, as a way of expressing hatred.
I would like to withdraw heavy hitters and just your relationship with those that may want to steer you their direction, not your direction.
Well, anti-Semitism is pretty general. If you know white people, they'll always say something a bit snide about Jews, and it's sort of endemic and a feature of Christian Europe. If you read The Merchant of Venice, and
That didn't happen to my family. Just to clarify, I didn't hear snide things about Jews when I was growing up. So,
well, everybody does, don't they? I mean,
I did.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be demonized as a Nazi, but it's kind of almost a habit of speech. It's in literature, it's in Dickens, it's in Agatha Christie, which they're going to censor now. So
maybe I was privileged. Maybe I was privileged.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm very curious to like how you've taken all this, the last 2 hours of stream and all of the opposition you're seemingly facing, and your reaction to it isn't of someone that's clearly it's not new to you. What's the goal? Because Gavin wanted to have a conversation with you to find out what your goal is, and now he could help because that's what Gavin does with everyone. But clearly, there are a number of parties that are protective of Gavin, that are suspicious of your goals, to say the least. How do you speak to those accusations?
Well, I mean, obviously, most people, most white people, to be are anti-Semites and Islamophobe. So when things go wrong, they blame. Okay. Most. I said most. I didn't say all. Quite a lot of people.
Most isn't even fair.
You can say many, but I wouldn't say
okay.
most.
All right. I'll say many. Or I'd say most people who get upset about politics, they are triggered about Muslims, particularly in England, and also in America. I mean, 9/11 and all that kind of thing, and this is how they feel. I mean, this is something I've observed, And obviously, you don't like it. You don't want to say
I'm wondering if
Christianism
this
has failed.
I'm wondering if this stereotype is like in your mind, or if you're using the stereotype like and as a part of like a communications tactic. But you're stereotyping, and I don't like stereotyping. Like when you say most, I would prefer you say many. I really would.
I've corrected myself. I said many.
But you didn't. You didn't.
I would say most. It'd be because of my associates.
Yeah, you have to realize that yeah. It's
your associates might not be the best representation of white people.
Exactly. but I'm glad we've cleared that up.
Oh man.
But it is a feature of Christian Europe, and
Well,
also America. People do feel a bit.
Tribalism, isn't it?
Pardon?
I mean, it's tribalism, isn't it? As far as every community, those of the community are insiders. Those outside the communities are outsiders.
Well, I think it's really more a class problem because in China during the Cultural Revolution, they didn't really have any Jews to speak of, but they targeted the elites, and if most Jews are middle class or upper middle class or mixed up with the
There's
elites.
another most. I'm just saying, we need to count the most every time you say most. I'm just going to have a problem every time you say most.
Nervous. I mean, I'm not inciting hatred. We're just explaining,
that's a very Marxist framework, wouldn't you say?
Well, I think the generalization holds. I mean, but the fact that you're also triggered by, the choice of my words is quite telling.
I mean, you say them confidently. You say them confidently. I have a problem when people say
because of my experience.
I mean, there's a veiled accusation in just the manner of speech you're choosing, with the words you're choosing to use.
Well, okay, if the cap fits, and wear it, but I wasn't accusing anybody here in particular. Right. I'm just talking
that's why
generally.
I felt obligated to correct you with that most, because that to just let that fly means, oh yeah, I'm agreeing with most. I think this is kind of what Jacob's talking about, as far as when you go off and you slip these little things in, it starts sounding very disingenuous.
Yeah, and then I could be by association. It's like people might think that I agree with what you're saying. It's like I'm not agreeing.
But anti-Semitism and Islamophobia is a problem. It is a political hot potato, isn't it? So I'm not, talking about something that we don't know what you're talking about.
It was a political hot potato. I remember when it was, but at this current time, it doesn't appear to be as much of a political hot potato as it was. That's my perspective. Now, I don't pay attention to the news like everybody, but when I do, I see other issues and topics. I don't really see topics about Islam and wars in the Middle East. It seems like that just kind of is happening behind the scenes right now, all the wars in the Middle East and that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, it doesn't make much sense if you bomb the crap out of countries in the Middle East, and then, and they come to the West, and, and then they occasionally blow themselves up because they're not happy about things. I mean, it's just a crazy, unsustainable policy, but
I'll agree with that.
So it is about American foreign policy and, triggering these acts of terrorism, and it should be discussed in an honest and open way. I mean, obviously, because it's religious, it's political, and politics triggers a lot of people. And I'm saying, here is the solution. The reason why things are going so badly as far as the government, as far as trust in the government by Westerners is concerned, is because you don't have a moral system, and your government is passing crazy.
So why are things going? So when you say things are going so poorly, is that just like all the policies at the federal government, or are you talking about like in the lives of individuals? Like, why are you like, what exactly is going poorly?
Well, I'm talking about school shootings, the most recent school shootings, rising crime, rising prices, the imminence of Third World War.
I don't know if I think that has more to do with a system that is corrupt that does not select the people who are the most competent and the skills that are necessary in order to do the most good in the world. I feel like the whole system has been corrupted. I don't think it's the moral fabric. I think it's just apathy and corruption.
Because you don't have an official religion in America. I mean, that's what.
I don't think that's it. I think people are like, you can even look at people who do have an official religion, and they will tend to stay out of politics.
Well,
our official religion is a constitution.
Yes, but people don't believe in it. But anyway, I mean, your I guess unofficial religion is a pursuit of happiness at the expense of others. And as far as Europeans are concerned, their unofficial religion is to obey the orders of Uncle Sam. And if Uncle Sam says bite on a grenade, they'll bite on a grenade because it's in the European interest to enjoy cheap energy, but because Uncle Sam says, "Go fight Ukraine, go attack, go fight Russia in Ukraine."
Those last two ideas are interesting ideas. Like I think those last two ideas are interesting ideas.
We're probably at a point where we should do some closing comments. Claire, I do appreciate you coming on here, and just to kind of, I guess, give a little bit of credence to what you're saying. I've heard of stories of people in prison that Islamic faith has saved their life, inspired them to be a better person, and all that structure is something that they really needed in their life and really valued, and it made them a much better person.
Yeah.
That alone, that's a good thing, and that's my 2 cents.
All right.
Yeah.
Do you have any closing words, Claire?
I'm just saying you need a moral system, whatever it is, because if you don't have a moral system, your ruling classes will just change the laws and exploit and abuse you, and you won't be able to say, hey, that's wrong, it's not in the official handbook, and you won't even be able to protect yourselves from each other, and that is really the purpose of religion or a moral system, which you don't have. And
to give that idea just a little bit of support, it would be nice to elect people who have good morals. That I would put it that way, more so than we need an overarching moral system for everybody. We should elect moral people.
Yeah, and nobody talks about morality, not even moral philosophers in the philosophy departments of good universities. They don't talk about things like that. They don't talk about wisdom. They don't talk about morality. They don't talk about good and evil. They only talk about, well, whatever rubbish they talk about.
I think there are some interesting points in what you have to say. What do you have to say, Teo? We're going to close it pretty soon. Your mic is there.
I think, Claire, you should visit a few churches. I think you'll find there are people having conversations that evolve around morality and wisdom and such. Maybe not culturally in the zeitgeist, but it's taking place, and I'm encouraged by what I see.
I'm actually a cultural Christian, in the sense that I go to church more.
Cultural Christian, secularist, Muslim. It's a lot of flags.
I'm not really Muslim either.
All right. All right, people. It was an interesting conversation, and y'all have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.